the agenda?
Second.
And seconded, are there any changes in the agenda? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
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 I can't hear you guys right now. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hear you very well.
I can't hear you guys. I could before, but then it started saying this meeting is being recorded, and now I can't hear you.
Interesting.
Okay, now I can hear you.
Oh,
It shows the microphone being set properly.
weird.
You good?
Yeah, I
Okay.
guess it was just for a little bit.
Do you,
But
you approve the
I approve
agenda?
the agenda.
Very good.
Okay,
We're all in.
next is approval of the consent agenda.
I move.
Did you just sign it? Did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Do I have a second?
Yeah. Did we get a second?
Yeah, I haven't got a second yet.
We don't
On
have
the
a second
agenda?
yet.
Second.
I second.
Consent
She
agenda.
seconded.
Oh, second.
Consent agenda.
There we go.
Move seconded.
Okay, she seconded. Are
What?
there any
Sorry.
items anybody wants to, any issues with the minutes?
I get my computer over here.
Oh my God, this is getting out of control here.
You ever sit next to him? It's
I
like
know.
he needs his own office space.
Okay, all in favor of approving the consent agenda as drafted, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. And obviously, Isabel's listening now, hearing. Anybody against? Citizen comments, is there anybody here for something that's not on the agenda? Don't see it. Middlebury wastewater treatment plant, proposal presentation. We'll invite you all to the, you must be Jenny.
I am.
Hi, Jenny.
For those of you that haven't met, I'm Jenny Oster. I'm with Wright Pierce. I am the Vermont wastewater group leader for Wright Pierce. I've been doing wastewater consulting for over 20 years, with the last 14 in Vermont, 14 plus I guess now. For this project, I'm the project manager and have a whole team behind me, but the intent is to go through the presentation that was in the packet. The goal is to give you really a high-level overview of what's proposed, the background of how we got here, and some context for the town to consider for moving forward with next steps. So we can start, and I've got it in front of me so I can see it. I'm not turning over there. One quick minute. All right, so I'm going to first go through to the next slide, which introduces the section on the summary of the needs. So why is there a project? So an overview, your wastewater treatment facility was constructed in 2000. That was brand new facility there. For background, all of the flow is pumped from the main pump station. So that's the image on the left, with the treatment facility as the image on the right. So all the flow that is conveyed to the treatment facility flows through the main pump station. Next slide. So just some background in general on wastewater infrastructure. So the typical lifespan of a treatment facility is 50 years. That's not saying you scrap everything and start over, but that's really when you need to go back and look at concrete tankage, that kind of stuff. It's possible that you would need to look at. But it is expected that upgrades are needed every 20 to 30 years. And why is that? That's because of the center. You need to replace your mechanical, electrical, and process equipment roughly every 20 to 25 years. Currently, the majority of your equipment at the treatment facility is about 24 years old, so you're in that range. The other anticipated, during that 20-year life, you're anticipating needing to incorporate advances in technology and more energy efficient equipment. You're typically, for most communities, your wastewater treatment facility is your highest energy consumer for a community. So knowing that, there's every 20 years we are able to do better based on the innovations on what is the equipment that's provided. The next slide. So where you guys have been. So the preliminary engineering report, PER, and forgive me if I say PER because I get into my acronyms and it's not helpful. But the preliminary engineering report was originally completed in 2021 by Tate and Howard. We were brought on to do a peer review and amendment to that preliminary engineering report. We submitted a draft in November 2024 that went through all of the needs, identified the alternatives for how you could address those needs, evaluated those alternatives, and identified recommendations. So we're at that point now where we've identified a set of recommendations for you to consider. And the last thing to note, the assessment portion of that is indicated the majority of your components have about a 2 to 5 year or less of anticipated remaining useful life. And the next slide is just a table that summarizes it. So on the left, those are the different process components. There's a lot of different components that are incorporated into your pump station and your treatment facility. And you can see that middle column for 2 to 5 years. We're anticipating in typical useful life for that. Most of that equipment has about until 2029. There's a couple things that are before that and a couple things that have a little bit more life than that. So what are the drivers for this project? First is age-related needs, and you can kind of see some pictures. So, wastewater produces hydrogen sulfide, a corrosive gas. It's also a humid environment. So the portions of your treatment process that are exposed to this, it's anticipated that you're going to have a level of corrosion. So those first two pictures on the left are at the screening building, the screening room at the main pump station. And there's just evidence of what is expected to have some corrosion within that time period, 20-year time period. The center, so the controls background is at the end of its useful life, and your operators are struggling to find parts as they're not readily available, and that's really the controls backbone of your treatment process. Second from the right, that's a picture of your lime stabilization process. And for those of you who've done a tour in there, in that room, you can see it's a corrosive environment. It's a high duty area, and you can see just visually looking at it, seeing portions of that are not doing so well after 20 years of use. And the farthest on the right, that's your UV disinfection system. So your current unit is no longer supported by the manufacturer. So in order to find parts, you have to go off eBay and whatnot. So it's a point where it's expected to need to upgrade that piece of equipment. The next slide, another project driver that I think you all are familiar with is flood protection. So we have some pictures from the flood in 2023 at the main pump station that resulted in catastrophic failure of the pumps. In other words, none of the pumps were pumping or able to convey the flow to the treatment facility for a period of time. So looking at what can be done at that site for mitigating flood. And so what we're looking at is, so the picture on the bottom center is your generator. It's an at-grade structure, and that flooded, so your backup power, if we're needed in that kind of situation, wouldn't be available. So we're looking to raise that. So a new structure to put the main pump station generator in, and then permanent flood doors. That's just an example of what they could look like on a portion of the main pump station control building and where the pumps are located. So the good news is there's potential for FEMA hazard mitigation funding for that portion of the project.
So Jeremy suggested that with flood control, you could have water halfway up those doors and be able to pump water out at the rate that it got in to the below grade.
Yeah, you're trying to keep it from what you're seeing on those stairs there, from being able to get
obviously you don't want that
area.
Yeah.
And then the other portion that we're really looking to protect versus every single piece of equipment is, we don't have a picture of it here, but the control panels for all of that equipment are good, about 12 inches off the floor. So we want to ensure that is can't be submerged, because that's a much longer period of time to go in and try to replace all of those controls as well. So, working with Jeremy on what portions are strategic in including the flood protection, and since the main pump station isn't manned, we're looking at permanent solutions versus you can have removable flood doors, but since that's not manned, and the example of the 2023 flood, they didn't know. There would have, I think Bob Wells had said to me, got a call from you,
Yeah.
and he's like, what do you mean? It's not even raining at my house. And
Right.
so this is hopefully meaningful protection, so you're not in this situation again.
Okay, thanks.
Jenny, are those flood doors spec'd out, such that they'll last? Cause we're just replacing doors and stuff at that main pump station now. Are these flood doors spec'd out so they'll last longer, or should we plan to have to replace those flood doors on a more frequent basis?
I'll need to understand from the manufacturer, and we haven't selected at this point.
Okay.
So it would be a good question for, in the process of selecting what you want to go with, is understanding what they would anticipate for a life for that in making if one has a shorter, but
These also aren't in as corrosive an environment as in the screen room, which is
Yeah.
where we did this,
Ah,
Okay.
right.
replace the doors.
Right.
Okay,
So
I just
this-
wanna make sure that we think about that a little bit, like, sometimes we have a tendency to go with the least expensive option, but if that means they need to be replaced in 5 years,
Right.
it's not the least expensive option.
absolutely.
And I just wanna make sure that we are thinking about
Making a
that.
long-term investment.
Yes.
That's
Yeah.
Agreed. So the next section is, and there's a lot more material on this, I'm just doing a really high-level summary. So the summary of what our recommendations are by different process elements. So starting with the main pump station, so replacing the influence screen, refurbishing that building. The flood protection, we're gonna replace the standby emergency generator, and put that on a new structure that is elevated, and then a new hydrogen sulfide mitigation, chemical feed and storage. So it's adding chemical there, so it reduces the hydrogen sulfide release.
Yes.
So when it gets to the treatment facility, they're seeing corrosion as that is suddenly, out of a long force main, it goes anaerobic, and you have more release of the hydrogen sulfide. When it suddenly hits the air, it's all releasing at the influent box of the SBR, and they've replaced anything that wasn't stainless steel. I think all of your original equipment mounts have been replaced, so the idea is to eliminate that with chemical addition.
Is that an expensive addition?
No, it's relatively, what the expense is the life cycle on paying for the chemical, but putting in a chemical storage tank and a couple of pumps,
Okay.
it's not relative to, it's all relative, but compared to some of the other bigger ticket items that are part of the project, no. So as we move over to the treatment facility, the first is the septage receiving. So that's a picture of the existing septage receiving unit. So a new unit, new transfer pumps that moves the septage over to the sludge holding tanks, piping and valve, spill pad modifications for when the haulers, for how that is currently, there's any protection. So some improvements on that whole process. And then demolishing the existing redundant grit system. You have grit removal at the main pump station. There's a redundant system currently at the treatment facility that we would demolish. So the next is the secondary treatment. This picture is understandably hard to see, but what it is your 4 SBR tanks and your 2 sludge holding tanks. This is the heart of your facility. This is where you are essentially achieving the wastewater treatment. So there's a lot that goes into, on the next slide, that is part of your overall secondary treatment and sludge storage improvements. So it's basically all of the equipment where there's mixers, decanter, air suppliers, your diffusers, your air piping, the valves associated with that, your blowers, transfer pumps. It is controls, and did I miss any of the other bigger things? That and all the instrumentation that's associated with running that process.
I mean, for the folks at home who are trying to follow along, SBR is a sequenced batch. We treat wastewater in a batch. And
Yes.
there's 4, okay, thanks.
Yes, it's a
Just-
sequencing batch reactor, so each of those tanks essentially operates as its own treatment facility, and it does it in a batch process versus a flow through. So at a period of time during the treatment, flow stops coming in, the treatment process occurs, and then once that process is made through, it flows out. So in a period of time when one basin is not receiving flow, another one is, so it's cycling through that series of basins. Next are the disinfection improvements. So the conceptual drawing at the bottom is within your existing channel. So we are looking to put a 3-bank system. You currently have a 2-bank that takes up a bit more space in that channel. And so we are looking at new effluent flow measurement, but it is designed to treat your peak flow. Right now there has been some issues with that nearly surcharging. So there's been, the flow is a bit higher than what that system was designed for. So there's minor channel modifications that are associated with that.
Guessing MGD is 1,000,000 gallons a day?
Yes, sorry, then
That's
like
fine.
it's gonna be lots of, every time, there's probably, I need to remind it, never have acronyms. So what we're adding on the effluent end, so the tail end, you're required to measure your flow, it's part of your permit reporting. So the next slide shows what we're proposing. Instead of right now, you have a big overflow meter that's used for flow measurement, but putting in an effluent flow meter because we're encroaching on that with having the 3-bank UV and disinfection system. Then this is a series of miscellaneous essentially. So we're gonna upgrade the chem feed and storage for phosphorus removal at the, that currently exists. There's some operations buildings, HVAC improvements, improvements to that are more building improvements to the chemical storage containment area. There's building improvements to the solids handling building, and site improvements, some eliminating pooling and compliance with the 3-acre stormwater rule, and then the generator also for that facility would be replaced. So most all of this so far has really been age-related replacement, so replace in kind for the most part. Where the bulk of our work in the evaluation was in your solids handling alternatives, and what the drivers for that were, we have the age-related, you currently have belt filter press for dewatering and lime stabilization for processing to create Class A or Class EQ biosolids. Those are at the end of their anticipated useful life, and those technologies are now obsolete for this application. So we are really looking at 2 new, what we put, it's a blank slate. You're gonna be putting in dewatering and what else? So we evaluated 5 options for Class EQ, and that's excellent quality. It used to be known as Class A, but it's the highest level, it's what you produce now. We looked at thermophilic anaerobic digestion. I'm not going to go into detail on all these. I'm just going to use words, but there's all the backup for this in the reports. Thermohydrolysis with mesophilic anaerobic digestion, drying plus pyrolysis, and supercritical water oxidation. Oh, and I missed probably what the biggest thing that drove a lot of this. The other driver is PFAS. So that's the forever chemicals. They're becoming very regulated. They're regulated in our drinking water. They're becoming regulated more so in our solids. So the solids that are discarded from your wastewater treatment facility need to go somewhere. And they contain PFAS. And this Vermont DEC put together an interim strategy for land application of biosolids in spring of last year. It's an interim strategy that identifies top concentrations before you would not be allowed to do land application. So there's uncertainty in sludge disposal, and those costs are going up, and the options for where disposal can happen are becoming more limited. So it's in that context of trying to set the town up to have the most flexibility in sludge disposal. So in order to evaluate those 5 alternatives, we completed a life cycle cost analysis. So we looked at the capital cost, we looked at heating costs, electrical costs, labor, maintenance costs, how wet or percent solids that comes off the ultimate process. So you would determine a volume that would need to be disposed, and then the associated disposal cost.
Is 2% APR reasonable for municipal money?
For clean water SRF plant loans, that you would be likely, that would be how you would finance it, is 2% over 20 years.
Great.
Yep.
Lower than our regular bonds.
Yeah, and lower than inflation, right? Like, you're paying it back with cheaper dollars.
Even our regular bonds are basically at inflation,
Yeah.
3 point something.
Yeah.
It is nice that the state revolving fund program exists. So that analysis, we went through and identified the recommended alternative is drying. So all of those processes have dewatering ahead of them, and then what is the solids handling portion at the end. So it's dewatering plus drying. It had the lowest life cycle cost that was tied with the thermophilic anaerobic digestion, but it's a far more reliable process compared to thermophilic anaerobic digestion. It also has the flexibility for future destruction, adding the pyrolysis process on the tail end for PFAS destruction. So you need to have drying ahead of pyrolysis. And so although we're not recommending you advance with pyrolysis at this point because the regulations aren't fully formed on driving you to do that, this would set you up for the ability to just add that as a step in the final processing of your solids. It also had the lowest estimated greenhouse gas emissions associated with the overall process. So just a picture of what that would look like. So the equipment that would be associated with the dewatering and drying is 2 new dewatering units, a polymer feed system, a hopper system that feeds the dryers, 1 to 4 new drying units. It's really dependent on the manufacturer, and we'd go through a process of doing a competitive pre-selection for that piece of equipment, odor control, and then a solid storage area for once it's gone through the process.
What's the moisture content at the end of this?
So in the upper 90s. So we did a pilot with one of, and that's relative now, you probably get 16, 17% solids. So we actually did a pilot last summer with one dryer manufacturer, and they were getting 97, 98% solids. So
It was
Wow,
pretty-
wow, wow.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool.
And these could be either natural gas or electric, but electric seems preferred for cost and other reasons now.
For
it could go, I think the cost is probably cheaper with natural gas. I think from looking at the greenhouse gas, it would be, because your electricity comes from a cleaner source, that is potential. But we'll be able to go through design and fine tune that selection. But because you have a natural gas line running through there, electricity is clearly there. The cost isn't really significant enough for us to go in and say, at this point, we feel like we need to make that selection.
A lot of the major equipment there is for the amount of electrical handling that's going on already. I would see where using a flammable material rather than resistive heating might make the electrical a little less capital intensive to upgrade.
It definitely is the devil's in the details when you go through and pull all of that in. So,
Yeah.
but it is nice that both are an option. And when we're at the point of making that decision, we'll bring in all that information so you can make an informed decision.
Okay.
So, the next part is giving a little context of what are other communities doing? How is this? How do we move forward from here? So, the next slide is a list of recent projects. So with Shelburne, Virgin, South Burlington, Bartlett Bay, which is one of their 2 treatment facilities, Burlington, and then you guys. And I took a look at it for cost per million gallons, and that's where you the third from the right column. and then the cost per connection. So just giving some context, and every project's different, every need is different, so it's not appropriate to say these are apples to apples. It's more that you're in the range of what is being seen regionally for other projects.
I mean, some of our connections are big users, industry, the
Yeah.
college. I mean, you don't treat a house the same way as you treat
Right.
industry. So this cost per connection number feels awkward.
Sure. Yeah. You're gonna divide numbers if you got big numbers.
It's a
They
rough
work out
one,
differently.
and it's always tough to, it is, I would never try to draw a lot of specific conclusions other than to say that you're
A lot different
not out of whack.
rates.
Then,
There's been some preliminary conversation about perhaps providing wastewater services for Weybridge. Where are we versus our permitted capacity, and is this an opportunity to increase it?
you are not near your permitted capacity. I think your average annual flow is around 50% of your permitted capacity, and Jeremy, yep,
That's
okay.
pretty accurate, it's 50 or slightly under.
Okay,
Yeah, so
so
there- you do have
Weybridge
the
is not a
opportunity.
problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Some of it.
Yeah, good point.
Yes, that's right.
There's also pump stations that have to be considered.
Oh, of course.
I mean, that'd be.
It's not a small thing, I was
It has to
I was
get
just
there.
suggesting a little.
Throwing that out there.
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess you could summarize by saying, yeah, as far as capacity goes, there's capacity there to look at things like that. You would just then need to look at all the things in the line to get it over to the plant.
of course,
And whether or not that would be cost effective
sure.
at that point.
So in that this is a big number, folks are always gonna ask, why now? Why do we need to consider a bond vote now? Why do we need to do this project now? So if we go to, so the town had anticipated this. You knew the anticipated useful life of your mechanical, electrical, and process equipment. You have completed several years of study and due diligence in identifying the needs and evaluating alternatives with the intent that you are presenting what you feel is the most cost-effective solution to your community for moving forward. The other one that Jeremy can probably speak to best is avoiding additional sunk costs towards equipment. It's to keep all of this going, there's a cost, just as things break, trying to find pieces and parts for things that aren't going to necessarily be part of the long term. So moving forward, there's always gonna be part of that, but trying to limit that. There also, as you're approaching the anticipated useful life of the equipment, there is the risk of major equipment failure. So mitigating that, moving past that, and being in a more stable place from operations is a goal. And then, a bond vote is also it indicates community support, which makes the town more competitive in pursuing grants. So as we work through the design process, this is a conservative number. It's intended to be a conservative number as we go through, and I have a cost estimate in a couple slides. We'll continue to work through the design process with the intent of trying to reduce costs, be more cost effective where possible, and also look to pursue grant opportunities where available.
So by conservative, you mean this is a potentially upper end?
We're
price.
using a 30% contingency, and I think, let's see, if we go to 2 slides.
Yep.
So there's a whole list of what the different contingencies and what went into that cost estimate. So on the subtotals are the construction costs roughly by process element. So you can go through each of those and see how those add up to a construction subtotal.
Each of those is a 30%.
Each of those includes 30% contingency already.
And inflation factor.
And inflation to the midpoint of
So they need to
construction.
round it up to 50 or some higher rounded numbers, like you already got stuff built in.
It is built in. We included a construction contingency, which is typical, DEC requires that for construction funding. We also included a BABA contingency, that's a Build American, Buy American. We're required, if you're using Clean Water SRF, that great 2% loan rate. you're required to meet those conditions, which unfortunately, increases cost a bit. We have assumed the technical services based on Vermont DEC's curve for fees for design, study, and construction phase. We made some assumptions for administrative costs, short-term financing, and materials testing to come up with a final number of roughly just a bit shy of 50 million.
Can you explain the short-term financing to me?
So as you're gonna need to pay your contractor before you get reimbursed from the state. So there's usually a little bit of financing as you're paying out your construction contractor before you get your reimbursement. So it's an estimate, and with a larger project, it tends to be realized. Unless cash on hand you're able to float that, so.
It's like a line of credit or something.
Understood.
What's the potential amount of grants that we might?
I have a grant slide and a couple slides. So, the most likely is the pollution control grant, and that is administered through the Water Investment Division of the Vermont Department of Environmental Conservation. So they're the folks that run the SRF, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, and they estimate that, and I think I wrote it in there. Projects are eligible between 10 and 35%, so it ends up being based on a scoring. I think your project is probably in that 15 to 20% eligibility based on historically how that has played out. There's also because your engineering services were selected on a qualifications-based selection, you do get engineering services subsidy. There's the FEMA that we've already talked about, the Northern Borders Regional Commission, so they have grants that are up to $1 million for infrastructure. I think as you're talking about providing, every grant has a different factors that you try to identify that shows how you meet what their goals are. So in this case, some of the regional septage receiving that you already do, and potentially with the drying, there might be more interest in folks sending their solids to you to get that 98% solids content. And then there's congressionally directed spending, so those vary, and they seem to really change year to year, but you've got a very good grant writer on your staff historically, which is pretty awesome.
We don't have Senator Leahy on Chair of Senate Appropriations
Yeah,
this time
so
around.
it's not as, yes, I would say that the biggest ones that I have been familiar with were when Leahy was in office on getting larger CDS numbers.
So you've done many projects before, so I guess my question is, traditionally, what type of percentage of this total bill could we hope to expect? Because I know where these
I
are all the
think
grants,
I would comfortably say 20%.
Okay.
And it may be over time, that doesn't mean up front. So like the pollution control grant, you get in line for those, and you are eligible for it, but so it's funded by the legislature. So each year they fund, a varying amount. It's never the full ask, and so you have to get in line and queue for that. And there are a lot from that. What are other communities doing? There are a lot of big projects going on right now, so you'd get in that queue. So it may not come in at the front end, but at some point that pollution control grant should be fairly predictable. And then the rest of them, it's harder to say.
Okay. Well, that means at best case, we're gonna be having to fund $30 million, right? If 20% is the maximum we expected in grants, then
10 million.
so we got another 80% of that's a lot of money.
And you're saying that the conservative numbers are gonna come down before that to get to 30?
Probably, yeah.
So if we go to a previous slide that had the schedule.
Heather has a question.
Oh, sure, sorry.
So Jenny, I'm pretty sure that we got some USDA funding for the original, the plant that we have now, and you don't have that listed here. Is that a loan program? Is that a
So-
grant program?
We can certainly explore it. So where it's trickier is your median household income doesn't place you as competitive for that grant program as it does for other communities. And we can have they certainly, if they feel like they can help your project, they want to do so, but they have to follow the terms of how they can award grants. So we'll definitely talk with them. It's just your median household income makes it less competitive for that.
Thank you.
If we phrase it as a regional plant, it might be
Yeah.
more appetizing.
You know,
to them.
doesn't the regional taking in Virgin's and Brandon's, doesn't that pose some risk for what additional things we might have to deal with that are unforeseen, or PFAS or other things? What do you, how do
So
you?
we already take septage from unknown sources.
Yeah, okay, but I guess it's daunting enough to fund this, but taking on additional stuff from other areas is what could go wrong. I don't know, forgive me for.
No, I think it's
Worrisome.
in setting up whatever agreement that you would have with a community that you're choosing to take the solids on, dictating what the quality that is needed for them to bring it over and whatever testing requirements. I think because the PFAS is relatively new in how it's being handled, how that is probably a few years from becoming a practice, because a lot of facilities already do take solids from other communities, other facilities, and they're going to be, anybody who's taking somebody else's material is going to feel that risk. And so I think some of that is going to play out and become more clear on what would be recommended to include in an agreement if you were looking to accept other communities' materials.
Jeremy?
So I guess I just want to say, yeah, so we do take septic from other communities. We also do take sludge. So for instance, for Jens right now, when they do the cleaning of their lagoons, we will take their lagoon sludge and process it with our solids handling treatment. So it's not anything we haven't done before. And I think the thing that we need to look at moving forward is risk versus benefit, right? So there is risk associated with introducing other communities, but there's also possibly some benefit there of defraying costs for the town of Middlebury by partnering with other communities, you know, because those costs to make the equipment that much bigger to possibly take care of another community, you know, there's the upfront cost and then proportional cost as things are large, and there may be opportunities here to defray costs for the town of Middlebury by finding partnering regional opportunities and make us look better for some of these grant opportunities going forward. But again, I totally acknowledge there is risk there. I think it's a risk reward thing that we just need to look at as we're moving forward with design.
Jenny, is your firm working with any of the other communities regionally that we've kind of, I think, battered around as potential partners in this?
Yes, we're the engineer for Virgin's, so I'm very familiar with that facility in particular. So.
And have they expressed any interest in pursuing something?
Yep, they currently have a process that stores their sludge over long periods of time. It's called a lagoon, so it ends up sitting in that big pond essentially for a long period of time. They're switching to your current process, the sequencing batch reactor, which consistently produces solids. And when we did the life cycle cost analysis, it was more cost effective for them to haul it to Middlebury than it was to put in their own dewatering on site, because they're a smaller facility. So if that became not an option, then they would need to look to making that investment at their own facility.
Are there any permitting issues that would create some headwinds to doing something like that if you were hauling that much sludge?
It's pretty common. So a lot of the facilities, the smaller facilities, haul to other communities. So what is required is there's sampling requirements to demonstrate that, you know, the things that won't ever come out of your solids after it goes through the process, so like metals have for a long time have been the primary constituent that of your sludge that needs to be documented, that you're not sending over a high metal material that then is gonna end up being a hazardous waste that can't go to your disposal site. So similar to that is you're gonna need to require sampling that demonstrates that what they're giving to you, and it's not sampling of every single load. So it is a set upon duration between sampling that everybody agrees to, and I think there's probably for PFAS that hasn't been defined. For metals, that's been pretty well defined for quite a while.
I also think it's in the state's interest for more municipalities to go to a regional system, and that's why they are introducing more funding for areas that are looking at that, because the PFAS conversation is so new, but the more they can do at the state level to just sort of minimize how many facilities they are regulating to those standards, I think.
They're anticipating next year initiating a study. DEC is on regional solids handling. It takes a few years at the state level for studies to get to the point where there's a conclusion, but it's absolutely that the there's a handful of facilities that make sense to make that investment, either from that they're making that investment now for other reasons, or by location. They already receive solids from a lot of other facilities, or they're a heavy septage receiver. So septage plays as much of a role in this as the solids in how Vermont handles wastewater.
And we're already in that category.
Yep.
And it would enter into our process over in that building where it's basically dewatering and drying. Is that the part of it?
So it's, yeah, the new drying equipment and the dewatering equipment would go into the existing sludge building. So the belt presses would be removed, the lime stabilization would be removed. We'd sequence that so we could work it in, so that, cause those need to keep operating while we build the new. And then you have the two bays at the end of that building, the one open air bay and the enclosed bay. So we have a fair amount of space. It's actually, it should work fairly well relative to a lot of these sequencing projects to incorporate that new equipment within the existing building.
You're asking if it would get delivered to the main plant as opposed to the pump station, though, I think,
Right.
right? Yeah.
Yes. Yep. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thanks.
All right, I mean, it was both, that was informative too.
So, again, for the folks at home, we're trying to, the sticker shock of this is huge. And board members I've appreciated the tours at the plant to show the level of deterioration and the need for action to be able to be ahead of the things that are failing because of this corrosion and time. I mean, I also asked to try to think of, is there a way we could chip away at this network? Could this be phased at all? And I'm persuaded that it could not be phased. We have to keep treating wastewater continuously while this is done, and we need the vote to support the funds to do this in a way that's most efficient. So there isn't any way to chip away at this, is what I've gathered from this. And I don't know if other members want to support that for the record here, but I can't find a way to chip away at this, to make it, just to reduce the sticker shock.
I don't think there's any way to chip away at it for the overall bond proposal, but I think they're like sort of similar to what we're looking at with the main pump station, where we're pursuing mitigation funding, flood mitigation funding, or with the control panel. I forget what tour, we've been on a lot of tours lately. It might have been with Brian. We were looking at the control panel at the main wastewater plant, looking at taking that as a separate project. But again, we need the funding, or we need the approval from the community for the overall bond to be able to pick away at those projects.
there was some discussion of, maybe it's not phasing them, but some accelerating a couple of
Yeah.
the more critical pieces that, the hardware, software is long outdated, and if we had a critical failure, it would put us out of commission for an extended period of time, and if we could accelerate those and potentially go after some funding for that specific project. Right now, when we're repairing those are very expensive repairs because of the fact that we're having to chase parts that are no longer being produced. So.
I mean, to provide an example of that, Brian, is for instance with the controls, I actually just had a specialty contractor come down to try to back up our controls as much as could be. Because in taking over the plant, going through all the stuff, we have backups of one of the things I did find backups. So we were actually able to make backups of the CPUs for the computer backbones. But all of our touch screens actually have programming in them. They're so old they could not download the program. So they're actually going to take photos of every single touch screen. And in the event we lose one, they're going to have to reprogram it to reinstall it. Because we can't get the programs off of the touch screens. That's how old the hardware is. So that's kind of a good example of the need to get in front of and replace this stuff and kind of what we're dealing with to try to make sure that we have the protections to keep us online, but the repairs become difficult at this point just due to the age of the equipment.
And the schedule that's shown there doesn't, it counts for things going all at once, but it's, that is one that we had specifically discussed because it's lower lift design-wise, because the majority of it is, you know, it's controls and instrumentation. There's a handful of things. A lot of it goes on the SPR manufacturer to put together updated controls. That could be accelerated versus, as you can imagine, some of the bigger portions of the project require a lot more engineering effort to get those completed. So, and there could be strategic funding in breaking off different parts as that we're keeping our ears to the ground for.
What does permitting look like in doing a project like this?
So, because you're not changing, you're not adding capacity, it's not, it is more about design and concept approvals at the front end. There is the stormwater 3-acre rule. That's probably the biggest new piece of regulation, so that would need to be incorporated into the project. So treating the stormwater that is generated in the impervious surface on the site, and the remainder of it isn't, there are certain steps that you have to go through to get Vermont DEC approval of your project, but it's, when your permit isn't changing, you're keeping the same project, that process, the majority of it is age related, and you're not adding capacity, it's relatively straightforward.
Can I ask about the timing? You know, this could be at the town meeting or like the library. If we learn more about the funding and other things, it could be a little later perhaps. But, I mean, in a special meeting where we know more about the alternative sources. Do you have any opinion about the timing and
So
this?
the benefit to more at a town meeting time is you will score higher on your priority list application, which is how you get scored for that PC grant, and where you rank in possible funding, because they only have so much clean water state revolving fund money that can go out each year. So one of the points that you get is for having a bond vote scheduled. You get more points if you have a past bond vote.
And congressional and Northern Borders
Yes.
both ask that, and those are March, April timeframe, so we would have the bond vote results for those applications.
Okay, so it's more of not whether we have it at a town meeting, it's if we can get it ahead of these applications, yeah. Okay.
You'll be more competitive for them. So the, one way to think of it, and we do this a lot with rural development projects, is this bond vote, it's a big number, and we don't anticipate going all the way to that top number, but and for each portion of the project, as you are ready to go into a construction loan for it, it's gonna need to come back to get approval for that loan. See, there's gonna be stepwise time to come back to say, this is acceptable, I understand how this is gonna affect ratepayers, I understand where we're at with the grant funding. So the bond vote is almost like a yellow light to moving forward, and the green light is when each of these projects are further along and they come to you and we say, okay, we've identified this grant, we've taken this, some of these assumptions were too conservative at the front end, which I believe is appropriate, and now we can see we can reduce that contingency, and hopefully we're seeing, as the projects progress, more grant funding, less contingency, and we land in a place that is below. But my recommendation is to bond for the conservative high number, and have more flexibility within that. And it's gonna come back to you probably in several different projects, points where you get to say, okay, yes, this makes sense, let's move forward with this. Or, you know, worst case scenario, if we had another COVID times where a cost estimate I would have given you the week before COVID versus a year after would have been vastly different, and those are factors that we can't control. You also have some flexibility for things that need to happen, you have the flexibility to move forward. So if you are, one of the things that you are asking the voters to support is this the project scope that we feel is what we need to move forward with? The costs are gonna be defined at a later date. These are conservative estimates for us to move forward from a planning purpose. So there's a bit of trust that comes in with this, that you're asking the community for, that you will report back to them as the project proceeds.
Basically what we've been doing on other large bonds.
We typically try not to take out the entire bond because we have been successful in getting.
Yeah, we've had very good success in recent years.
And, you know, the question is, can we push this off? We got a lot going on. Inflation's a straightforward one. Your prices aren't going down. Your increased cost of operations, the more that goes into those sunk costs, those are gonna add up and they're just lost. Those are costs that you wouldn't have necessarily had to incur. If your lime stabilization process were to fail, your disposal costs would pretty instantly, you would no longer be able to land apply that, which is that $20 per wet ton. It would go to around $200 wet ton as that failed, until you had a solution in there, you could get back to that. And then I'll stand up for Jeremy here, operator fatigue. I think it's tough to be in the situation where you're getting middle of the night calls, needing to come in on the weekends, whatnot, like unanticipated emergencies that you need to attend to, certainly creates a challenge.
Would you work last week, a 28-hour day?
No, it wasn't that bad. There's a couple that were in a row. I mean, it's, yeah, and you know, I'm here, anybody who doesn't know this is Dean Rayhew, he's the assistant chief operator, he's here to support the project. You know, we're happy to do the work and we're happy to work for the town and we enjoy our jobs, but you know, what bothers us more than all is like the thought of one of these things breaking and us just not being able to get it going again. Particularly like the lime stabilization process. I mean, I started with the town 2.5 years ago. Dean was losing sleep on that when I got here. He's losing more now. So it's just, we really want to see, we want to see that us providing a good product for, our EQ biosolids and good water quality out the door to the Otter Creek. And we just worry like heck that one of these things is going to go and we're not going to be able to get it going. And we also, Dean and I are both taxpayers. We're not ratepayers, but we're taxpayers, and we understand that you need to use money effectively, and we hate to see the sunk costs. You know, there's one unit, the lakeside unit, which is the first thing in our treatment that takes the rags and everything out. I'm gonna put $100,000 of that in the next 4 months just to keep it running until this project goes forward. And when this project goes forward, that piece of equipment will be yanked out, and a new piece of equipment will be put in. And, you know, when we're talking about expenditures of that much just to run equipment for 4 to 5 years, it all adds up, and that's what concerns us too. It's just seeing those sunk costs. And yeah.
Can you give me an idea, like if that lime stabilization went down tomorrow and we were unable to land apply and we had to start landfilling, what are we talking about numbers? Like 200,
Yeah, how many wet tons?
like what are we talking about? What is the sunk costs? What would be the sunk costs associated with it? How much money are we talking about needing to come up with?
So I have not run those numbers. Bob ran those numbers.
Do you know how many,
Right,
you know
yeah.
how many wet tons
So
a day?
I guess I wanna, I'm sorry to put you on the spot right at the
No, it's
moment,
I have that answer.
but I think that's something we need to know.
Yeah.
I think that is,
I might be able to answer it.
I think it is something that could potentially really happen for us because we have not addressed age-related needs in a timely manner. And I think people need to be aware of what that does to the rates, what that cost would be. I think it's huge, like it would be a big scary number, right?
Yes,
And-
no, it is.
and that
It's-
is money-
and that's one of the reasons I don't wanna say it, is because I don't know.
I
what
know,
the
but I
exact
think
number
we
is.
should
But
be-
I know I've read it before, and I can give you that number. It's a multi-fold increase in our disposal costs overnight.
But I think, you know, at some point, we need to stop we need to be realistic, okay? Like, we're talking about a $50 million project, but if just this one part of the project stopped working tomorrow, this is how much money we are going to have to pay that is not gonna be going towards this project. And I think we need to be honest with people about what that looks like.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah,
And stop just,
be pretty
you
easy
know,
to figure out if we need
stop,
a wet ton.
you know, crossing our fingers and toes and hoping that everything keeps going, you know?
The other part of that equation is, you're talking landfill. and
Right.
Space is at more than a premium right now, for, if you can even get quota for a landfill in
Yeah.
that situation.
It's really, I don't, you know, I just can't seem to stress enough the fact that this is really critical. Like, we need to address some of these things and we need to address them soon.
Yeah, as the person who happens to be this week reviewing the checks, I couldn't help but notice that, you know, this month's sludge disposal was $4,800. You know,
Times 10 is,
but that's just $20, 20 tons a load, $400 a load, 12 loads.
Yeah.
You know,
So it'd be
we pay for lime,
40,000.
this lime stabilization, this messy process is in the order of magnitude of $200,000 a year, right?
Mhm.
And what we pay for electricity in this plant is $27,000 a month. So this is one of the most expensive operations we have in the town.
for sure.
And the numbers are big. But I'm convinced this is a project that we need to do. The numbers are fearsome. And the challenge is conveying this to the community. How we can pay for it, how we can afford it. We don't know, we have the funding sources that we had in the past. We have to do it, we have to do it to earn the grant money, and we have to, I'm in awe of the expertise and function that we have in our wastewater division, you know, in managing what they have. And I hope that will inspire people to support this.
Jenny, besides the reliability and quality upgrades, would there be an efficiency upgrade as far as?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the biggest energy portion of your treatment facility is providing air to those process tanks. And the blower technology over 20 years is vastly improved. So you'll have far more efficient blowers that are the biggest energy users, just without a doubt.
Yeah, so I did do a tour. Instead of being all on or all off, it would be a variable output,
Right.
so you can keep it.
Would the lifespan expectancy change with the new equipment? Or?
No, I think that the anticipation that about every 25 years, you're gonna need an upgrade of that equipment should be the expectation. It may change over time, but that, I haven't seen that yet in pieces of equipment that are lasting longer, so it hasn't proven out so far.
I'm thinking the equipment of today is not the same as 25 years ago, right?
Right.
So there must be more electronics and computers involved.
Absolutely, yes. The controls and instrumentation, and that's where some of the issues that they have now, like with the touchscreen, all of that, that moves over time, and gets certainly more efficient, but also it just gets dated like any of our, nobody's using a 20-year-old laptop. So the controls are of the same, need to process the same level of data that you would expect from a laptop. So, and not all of it, but a good portion of your treatment facility is a tough environment. It's obviously moist, there's ports that are corrosive, there's heavy duty things like pumps or screening, things that are interacting with very abrasive portions, and that's their intent. So they're heavy duty portions of your equipment, and similarly with solids handling, the moving through those solids, it's a heavy duty ask of any piece of equipment.
Any other questions, comments?
So the other thing that scares me is the idea that the SBR concrete might be halfway through its lifespan.
You can inspect that.
That's
and
what I was gonna make
There
sure
certainly
of.
have been, I think it was the 50-year anniversary last week for the Clean Water Act, and that was what drove a lot of these facilities to be constructed in the
Exist, yeah.
70s. There are certainly tanks that are the same tanks that were put in that are still in operation. And it's not necessarily a wholesale repair, but you're probably looking at specific concrete repairs, not total replacement by any means.
Yeah.
And the thing to bear in mind, Andy, is because we maintain the basins, we take one down every year.
Right.
And actually do a full inspection.
Okay.
So, hopefully as we go into the next 20 years, we can catch repairs before they get out of control and do the crack mitigation and all the other stuff that would need to be done.
Sounds amazing.
I think something's unique to this project. We're gonna build a $17 million library. It's gonna be a big, beautiful, brand new building.
Right.
And it's
No, indeed.
There's no buildings being done in this thing, and we're gonna have the same stuff.
That's right.
You
For
have
three
the Friends of
times-
Library,
for-
we need Friends of Sludge.
We got
Wait,
new
3 times the money.
new doors.
We got new doors, they'll be pretty.
Yeah.
If it makes you feel
Yeah,
better
but-
again, I will think the blowers look beautiful.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You just have to convince everybody else of that.
All material, for sure.
It is, wastewater is not the most
No.
flashy,
No.
beautiful thing, so it does require a fair amount of public outreach and education for folks to understand the important, critical part of, your community that it provides.
As much as I love the library, it is more important than the library.
I understand.
Yeah.
Can't
When you
have a
start talking
library
about
if
the
the
quality-
toilets
Yeah.
don't flush.
If the toilets don't flush, there is no library, so.
I got it.
Friends of Sludge.
The other thing, I think coming back to what Jenny said about trust, right? And I think the water tank on Chipman Hill is a good example to share with the community on when we asked them to support that bond vote, what we had for a plan for financing and granting, and what we thought we would do for construction schedule, and we didn't get the grant. And the project didn't go forward until we got the granting, until the project that we put before the voters was as we put before the voters, right? And we could have gone ahead because we had their support and we could have bonded. So I think it's important to stress to the community that that we have upheld our end of these, construction projects and have not put them forward until we have met the granting that we originally said we would.
Sure.
So I think it's, I don't know how to do it, but if we gotta move this ahead, and I think we've gotta ask the community to trust us and support us in making the best decisions we can with this project as it goes forward.
I actually think we need to make a motion.
The other thing
Let's take
too
their name on this one.
is, as we're talking about rates, we need to make sure we're not only covering the cost of the bond, but we're thinking about money in the rates to cover things like basin repairs, or, you know, like that we're putting in the rates the money we need to keep things up over the next 25 years. So in 25 years, we aren't talking about equipment that's sold, we don't have backups for it, you know?
So what does a $49 million bond do to sewage rates?
You don't wanna know.
That's what I mean,
But I
it's
think
gotta be paid.
yes,
but-
but we, like Jenny just said, we won't know until we have the specifics. So there's this level of trust that we have to ask the communities to support the project, knowing that we don't know.
Right, but what we don't know is how much less than 49 million is gonna cost.
It is
So what
gonna
does
cost us
38,
more.
what does $38 million do to the sewage rates? I mean,
But-
I have no
but-
idea what that is. I know what I'm.
You're right, people are gonna ask.
You did some preliminary numbers, right? It was doubling the rates, right?
If we bonded for the full 50 million today, it would double the rates today.
Okay,
The base rate.
For 20 years while we paid up.
for just the base rate.
Yeah, I mean, our sewer, I just took our revenue
Got it.
and we need double the revenue.
Okay,
Okay.
that's an answer.
I just wanted to point out, two things that you should be thinking about. Rates are going to go up, obviously. If you don't put in the system, rates are going to go up astronomically. There are other people who use this besides the connections, and the portions of the system that are used by all the septage that is collected around the area should be included in how this is factored in. But the other thing we need to think about is 30 years from now, 25 years from 2029, you're gonna have to put out 3 times as much for the next system, because the entire system will have to be replaced, because we've already been told that systems only last 50 years. So this is the cost of having a wastewater treatment system. And maybe we haven't planned appropriately in our rates for the past 20 years to worry about capital equipment, to worry about
You're certainly
equipment
can't put it in
replacement,
the cost.
and we're gonna have to be thinking about that in the future. So these are all great questions, but they're really small. This is a buttload of money and all of us need to pay it.
Well, people have to understand that. I mean,
I get
that's
that.
that's what we're trying to bring out in a public
completely get
forum,
that.
is it's
But
gotta be
I think-
understood.
I think a lot more numbers need to be put forward here, not just what, Bob did, 3 years ago or whatever. These possibilities need to be accounted for and costs need to be put on them. Because if we lose one one portion of that system and we're sending our raw sewage into the outer creek, there's a lot more we're gonna be dealing with. And that's a possibility in the next couple of years.
You make good points. Could you give us the name for the public record?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ellen Cronin, I live on South Street. My waste goes into this system.
The one thing to note on there is you would begin paying on this until 2030, so there is some time to
Raise money.
raise money, to consider, you can look at your rate structure. There's things that, some of the details in there that may make this a better fit. It's not, you don't saying you want to go for a bond in March, voters approve it, they're not paying, it doesn't mean in April they start paying on it, so.
Well, we should start considering our rates for this coming year, for sure.
It also, you know, that double rate does not also include any potential, increases in septic receiving and what we charge for that septic
Right, I
receiving as
understand.
well.
I got it. Yep.
Last year we did raise those for sludge and septic receiving, and other communities that are in the same situation are doing the same thing, so.
As far as pursuing something like for Jens, do you need, is that something you're working with your counterpart there, or is that something that we need to address at the board level, or how do we pursue looking at that option as well?
I think it would come to the board level once we get to that point in the conversation, but there's still pieces that we would have to work out on the front end first.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'm going to make the motion that we had 2 meetings ago, with the expectation that there will be a later bond motion made at some point as we put an agenda together. But I will move to approve the proposal from Wright Pierce for improvements to the town of Middlebury's wastewater treatment facility totaling $49,589,000.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any comments or questions on that? Isabel, I apologize, I didn't look up it to see if you had any questions. Did you have any questions?
No, I did the tour with Jeremy on Tuesday of last week, and it was really informative. So I feel like I got a lot of my answers there, and I looked at this in the packet before the meeting. So any of the questions that I had before the meeting were answered during the presentation. So thank you to the team who put that together.
Okay, thanks, Isabel. All right, we have a motion and a second. If there's no other comments or questions, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Those opposed? We have a unanimous approval, so we need to look at, well, that's going to be on our
Are you available at town meeting?
town meeting warning.
I am right now.
We'll look, it's on here too.
Yeah, okay,
But,
all right.
and there would be anytime you have bond, you have your bond hearing presentation. I'm
Oh.
accustomed to doing those for sure.
It's a big project, and you explain it well.
I'm happy to, that is being a consultant in Vermont in this world, all of these projects are unaffordable yet necessary, and so trying to figure out how we can move through with your communities and trying to right-size the projects is hopefully what we're bringing to the table.
I'll also note the tour that Izzy was on, we started filming it to film all of the components that we're discussing, and we're going to put it together into a video so that for people that aren't available for tours, we'll be able to provide that to them.
It's a good idea. We also,
Yep.
maybe you can put it on the TV, mid-TV?
Yep,
Is that where you can put it on?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Jenny,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Emily, I think you have a couple other things for us.
I do. Go from wastewater to water. I have asked Otter Creek Engineering to provide us with a preliminary engineering agreement to find an alternate well source. And so that is in the packet this evening. And I know there was some concern that we would just be putting the alternate source right next to Palmer, and that is not the intention at all. They have a hydrogeologist on staff that would be looking at all of the various locations and considering well source protection and capacity and drawdown of neighboring wells and all of the other components. So it would at least start the conversation. We would be able to, I'll apply for priority list funding for SRF funding for the actual design and construction, but it would be a multi-year project that we'd be considering.
questions?
I just have a question. I know we've talked a lot about well sources over the last, particularly in the last year, but this is the first time I've seen it come up that you're gonna look for an alternative source. So, maybe I missed something, but, so with that in mind, I don't remember that being in the budget before. Where is this money coming? Was it in the budget?
Yeah, it's in the water budget, capital
Okay.
budget for this year.
Good.
Is there a need for, to do this now, or
There-
what brought this
so-
up?
If you keep in mind, so Palmer is well 2,
Yeah.
and that is our primary well that serves the town. We also have well 3 and well 4, which are sometimes operational. We've been having some issues with them. So well 2 is Palmer. It is a relatively shallow gravel packed well. It's 47 foot deep, I think, is what we're drawing from. Adjacent to it is well 1, which had to go out of production because it was contaminated. So if that happened to Palmer, we'd be
Big trouble.
in big trouble. I mean, we will have additional storage capacity with the tank, but better to have redundancy and protection. I think there's also, Palmer has, needs some upgrades too, so that if we found an alternate source, we could allow Palmer to go offline and make improvements as needed.
So what's the rate again that it produces, Palmer? Is that well 2, is that?
Well, 1,500 gallons per minute, somewhere in
That's what I
that
thought.
range.
It's one of the most productive wells in the
Yes, in the
state.
state, I know that.
The flip side of that is that it's drawing a lot of whatever's in that watershed in, and surrounding it is activities that potentially could cause contamination. And we realize so much on well 2 that I think our water chief said at the infrastructure meeting, if we for whatever reason can't operate well 2, we have 30 hours.
Yeah.
And we, because wells 3 and 4 can't make up, we need well 5. We call this the search for well 5. And we might think about how much we're drawing out of the Henshaw Brook watershed and what we ought to look at in the other areas north of that. That was the whole reason for acquiring the 70-acre Johnson site and having a well field there. We haven't received the real benefits of rate of production at wells 3 and 4, but well 2 is producing a huge amount. To say we're going to get that again is asking a lot. So
The reason I asked was because I don't see any introduction about why we are doing this. That's why I was asking.
it's because if anything happened with well 2,
Yeah, but
we
I
would-
didn't see it here. That's why I'm asking.
So we just completed an asset management plan,
Yeah.
and that was one of the top priorities in the asset management plan, and it's also referenced in the hydraulic report from 2018.
Other questions?
Do you know, Emily, I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. What's the cost associated, you think, putting in the well?
I would not even dare answer. So we have, well 2 is 47 foot deep. Well 3 and 4 are, 400. So obviously a very different casing that you're dealing with. So an entirely different cost.
I guess the point I'm wanting to make is we could easily bond for $50 million in the water system too, as well.
Well, yeah, because
To deal with, lines, to deal with
right.
wells,
I will say the funding, the drinking water state revolving fund operates a little bit differently than the clean water, which supports the wastewater and stormwater side. So the drinking water side applies $750,000 of loan forgiveness to projects that are over $1 million. They don't do that.
Let's go.
In the clean water side. So it's straight loan on the SRF for the clean water side, but there is some loan forgiveness on the drinking water side,
which we've taken
utilized
advantage of.
on Washington Street.
Mhm.
And I think we're looking to be in a good situation to get it for the water tank also.
we have to
My
do
point is,
lots of
we
million
also
dollar
need to spend a lot of money on this side of things too.
Absolutely.
And I just think,
And our rates are
I
low.
think, and this will result in rate increases, and I think it is just important for the board to be aware and conscious of that as well.
I would move to approve the proposed preliminary engineering agreement with Letter Creek Engineering for $54,000 relating to an additional town water supply source, a search for well 5.
Or a second, sorry. And approved.
Comments or questions? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
Next item, I assume this is what most of the community is here for. We're looking for approval to purchase 2 line striping pieces of equipment. One is the walk behind that we use for crosswalks and parking stalls, things of that nature. And then the other one is attaches to the back of the vehicle, and it's used for long line, main line. And so this has been, it's in the, they're fully funded now through the FY25 capital highway budget. And we're just looking to get the approval so that we can purchase it, and then it will be delivered in time for May to get the highway crew out there.
Questions? Pleasure of the board.
I'll move to approve the purchase of the, do you say it Graco? Graco? Graco line driver for $8,395 from Franklin Paint Company.
Moved and seconded. Questions on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
I'll also move to approve the purchase of the Graco line striper machine for $17,945 from the Franklin Paint Company.
Second.
Questions on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? So it'll be a lot easier for you next year to do the line striping.
We can get the rain to hold off at the appropriate time. I think this year, the week that they had the flaggers scheduled for night work, we got rain that entire week, and it foiled the whole plan. But
Sounds right.
There was a lot of weeks where we didn't have rain.
yes, but you have to book the flaggers like months in advance.
Flaggers.
Flaggers are the hang up, yeah, for doing night work.
Thanks,
Can't
Emily.
we switch to something like automated lights and stuff like that and not use flaggers?
Right, yeah.
You know, and you go a lot of places and there's
We
not
could
flaggers.
purchase those or rent those. Yeah, we could.
You wouldn't have to worry about schedules then, right? You'd,
What are you talking about, like the temporary lights?
Yeah.
yeah.
You gotta move those every time you're painting a crosswalk?
Well, some of them are
Some-
pretty
some of them
lightweight.
are on
They
yeah.
just are like on, yeah.
There's all kinds of technologies out there. I'm sure it's not that difficult. It's certainly better technology than having 2 people standing out there with flags. One, I had to wake one of them up because he was on his cell phone one day. I just stood there. It was not. He just watched his phone for. I finally got out and walked him to say, "You were gonna let me go through, not do your phone?" So.
Anyway.
Just a story. More stories. So.
Thank
It
you,
was a good
Emily.
question.
Okay, Crystal and David.
Brian, I want to correct myself that it is, yes, it's on line 31, so, of the budget.
We don't know what you're correct.
The general, the
Okay.
local option tax.
Oh, yeah,
There it
yeah.
I thought it was there, I just needed
1.3
to
million.
locate where it was. Oh, we're gonna, yeah. Here's all the documents, so if you want to pass those around, so you have
Oh,
those. for
more new stuff.
Budget stuff. It's in, no, it's in the packet, it's been in the
Okay.
packet.
Okay, I
Yes,
just, you know, like.
not new.
Those of us who make
Did
notes
you
of this
increase
stuff-
the paper budget as you printed
We
these?
need to now, actually, if we could do that.
It's Friday nights, there was Sunday nights, there was this afternoon. It's like, oh my God.
Not new.
All these documents were up Friday, with the exception of the 2 local option tax documents that we.
Just added one, the one payment, number 2, so really that wasn't a general.
I'll put up the,
Ah,
I'll start with this one.
Yeah.
We can just go through revisions actually.
Okay, that's great. All right, so We had minimal revisions. Most of those were ones that we had already talked to you folks about the last time. We were gonna go back and look at. So the first ones, we'll start with the line 461 and 462. Emily had told you, and Dave Shaw, the last one, that that information we just didn't get it into the budget for the transfer to the equipment fund and other service charges. Dave Shaw had said at that last meeting that he wanted to update it to 1750, that he hadn't gotten that number to us. That's
sorry,
that
what line
first
did you say?
cha- I'm
461,
sorry.
462.
Yeah, and this is this form here, there's
Wait a minute.
the budget revision summary document. That's just the changes that we made, yep, to the general fund from last meeting.
Thank you.
That's that first two. Line 664, which is medical insurance, that has changed, and that's because I just completed open enrollment and the numbers were lower than expected, so positive there. Line 670 was that unemployment compensation. We had talked about that last time. It was significantly high in the general fund, and that was right sized, so it was going to be so it's not nearly as high. We have the line 672, which is the childcare tax. That was just based on all of those other changes that just bumped that differently. Line 657 is the interest to the ILSI 100 bond. We received the updated schedule from the Vermont Bond Bank, and so that's where that came from. Line 702, the transfer to capital improvement. You'll see the note to the right. It says that 250,000, that was the placeholder in the capital budget for the library bond. He moved that over to this to offset that, and line 400, regular full-time. We added in holiday pay and shift differential for the police department. I think we talked about that last time, that needed to get added there, so that changed that line. Similarly, line 410, that's the overtime line for the police department, that had a small adjustment there that we needed to make. And line 421 is our school resource officer, and again, that was adding in holiday pay and shift differential that we needed to consider. Those are the only changes that we made to the budget, to the general fund, from our last meeting. So, any questions on any of those revisions?
The change, expenditure budget total versus, with three, the 14,648, what is that?
That is just the difference from the first version that we presented to you folks and this.
Are these change numbers above it supposed to add up to that?
I suppose so.
Well, there's a
That's
negative
not-
250,000.
That's the full
That's
budget.
That's the total, that's the new version 3 total.
Oh, yeah,
Line
I see what
700
you're
of
saying.
our
Yep, so
budget.
if you look, yeah, the expenditure budget total is that 14,648 or 60,
They're
14.
not linked just to
Yep,
the lines above.
exactly.
You can actually see version 2 at the top if you want to see that transition from
Yeah.
the versions of the drafts.
So in the.
You see it at the very top there, Dan?
The latest spreadsheet you have,
Yeah.
going
Okay.
to line
After
707, total general fund expenses, it's 14,548. You have 648 there. You're close, it's 100,000. But I think I follow you.
Yeah.
Um,
I would have to connect to Nicholas on that exact number difference there, but.
So, I had.
You're comparing 707,
With this.
column I to the number at the bottom, expenditure budget total V3.
Yeah, it,
Okay.
the staff is doing an incredible job of trying to juggle all this stuff, and
Yeah.
the moving of things. I've wondered about personally the capital improvements you know, decreasing and being a lesser number than the capital improvements, excuse me, the infrastructure committee had talked about. And once I realized that, there were things in there that were debt service, that, shift from capital improvements, the debt service line items. That explains why this number is a lot less than the number that the committee had. It's reflected in the committee minutes vote. But I'm comfortable with it. Once I understood that, and thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Before I move on to any of the other ones, any other questions on those changes? On that paper?
When we do have a final version, let's just make sure those numbers all match.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yep. I'll make a check list on that in the morning.
So the tax rate's looking better. I mean,
It
it's
is.
still high.
Yep, it is, yep. And I have the numbers that we'll need to talk about, and choose to lower those at some point, so based on the changes that we made from version 2 to version 3 of that general fund, it lowered that tax rate currently to that 7.44%.
Which is 6.6 cents.
Sorry, say that.
Which is 6.6 cents.
The change.
Yeah.
Yep, exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
And that's a 7.44%.
Yes.
Increase.
What did we did 5% last year? Is that what it was?
I think so.
So, what's the capacity of the general fund balance, saving what we need for rainy days, literally and figuratively, and the local option to reduce the amount we were raised by taxes?
Yep, so if you
Given
look at
all of the other things we're obligated to cover, the library, all the other things.
If you pull up this document, Cross Street Bridge Reserve projected balance / maintenance requirements. You'll see right there in the blue under fiscal year 26 that is the amount that's currently set aside in our as a balance for us, projected balance right now, reserved. We would need to lower that. We would need to take out of that. We have bridge maintenance out of that. Everything already is, so that 1,000 right next to it is the bridge maintenance in green, just
1 million.
aware of that. I'm sorry, 1 million, exactly.
It's a little more.
Yeah. So the amount that we would need to do to bring it down to a 5% tax rate would be 342,557.56.
34255.
557.56. That's what we would need to, exactly, that's the dollar amount that we would need to pull out of that reserve in order to reduce the tax rate to a 5% tax
Bring it
rate.
down to about $2 million total
Exactly.
reserve.
So, in the annual warnings in the past couple of years, there's been an amount to be raised by taxes, and then an amount from the Cross Street Bridge local option money, and it's been increasing at 700, 800, 900, you know, but you're saying it only needs to be 342?
No, additional.
Additional, exactly.
There's
Additional.
already 1.3 million in the
Okay,
budget.
okay, I was, thank you. Plus,
Yes.
okay,
Correct.
and
The amount in the budget keeps us at the same ending balance at the end of next year. There's no
Exactly.
growth in this reserve fund.
so,
Exactly.
and
you.
with all of the other things that have been voted
Mhm.
for the local option tax, which all, we're starting to lose track of, there's so many of them.
That's this sheet.
And the.
Exactly, that's
the-
this sheet.
Yeah.
So here's
So-
revenue and committed funds.
So with the library,
Mhm.
you know, there was 4 million.
Yep.
And I presumably that would, if you think of bonding for that piece of it, and how much would be paid out over time from that particular fund amount, what do we really have left? Is there enough to do this responsibly and leave a cushion, or are we using it all up?
No, absolutely, yeah, so that amount is, I mean, if you look at this amount here, you're drawing it down that much, right? I don't know exactly what the math is off the top of my head. But if you also look at this revenues and committed funds document here, you could see, so the projected revenues, numbers are there, right? And that is, that's the local option tax and the college gift. And then you have your library bond is the blue, right? And your committed totals is the other blue below it. We considered in the PD reuse, as well as our net payments. So, exactly, yep, so this number here, right, this 1,264,743 is a total of the 3 lines below it.
Ah, thank you.
So-
Your existing
Very good.
payments.
Okay, that
Larger.
helps.
Okay,
This
good.
graph is hard to,
So the things that are already.
This is a
in
place
the
maybe for a
budget.
stacked bar graph.
I had to take my own notes because,
Yeah.
like my brain
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
do
yeah.
these
Stacked
graphs
program,
either,
yeah.
but,
Uh-huh.
yep. Mhm.
So
So there's the line for the bridge debt payment
Mhm.
of 800. Where is the college's money for that payment? And they pay $600,000 a year, correct? Where is that reflected anywhere?
It's included in projected revenue.
Say again?
It's included in the projected revenue, the top
Exactly.
Is
line.
it in the projected
It
revenue?
is, that is the local option tax and the college gift combined, yes.
That makes a lot more sense.
the difference between the 2 lines is the gap you still have to fill,
Yep.
Right.
assuming your revenues don't change.
This is the amount that we're actually getting
Yeah.
from the local option tax, and if you add the 600,000 from the college, that gives you your top line, Bart. That top line here.
So I thought I understood this, but then I didn't.
Okay.
So, looking at this for fiscal year 25, over here on the far left of our CSB revenue and committed funds, we have a total commitment of $992,000 and total revenue of 1.9 million. But on this sheet, we're talking about a $1.3 million general fund from the Cross Street Bridge
Yeah.
local options.
so
And
some
the
of this
difference
is fund
between
balance.
these
Wait,
is 900,000, and we're taking out of that 1.3 million.
I think that is, oh no, that is considering the PD reuse and the,
Some of this reflects fund balance as opposed to,
Well, then I would expect the amount in there to decrease with the budget as we've seen it in V3.
so, let me just look at the math here real quick, I'm sorry.
That confuses me.
Right, this 1.3 here,
Yeah, that's what's,
right, and that's greater than this gap. And I would think it would be equal to that gap for us to have the same ending balance.
I think that's where the 600,000 from the college is going into.
Oh,
I'm just looking to see if I can find that 600,000.
yeah.
So there,
So if the 1.9 does not include the college.
yeah.
Ah,
what?
Well, according to Nicholas,
That's what-
it did include the college, and so that was the notes that I had taken, so.
okay.
It does,
it doesn't.
but it doesn't,
It doesn't?
but no, it does.
It does, it definitely does, so, yeah.
That does, we're talking
Yeah.
about 2 different things.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because the other question is where does the college money on
The college monies land on here, if you give me 1 second.
On the general fund revenue, I'm thinking it's in that local option tax.
I think it is also, cause he's combining them, exactly.
Oh, boy, we think it's a
So the
precarious
1.3
position when we think about
million
it.
Isn't it on
in
line
the
one oh
general
four?
fund includes
on,
the
let
college
me-
gift.
Okay, there it is, it's on 104.
Yep, it is. Cross Street Bridge miscellaneous revenues, so.
I didn't think we took that much out last year. I looked at our warning before. And do you have last year's warning by any chance?
give me a second.
I do.
Well prepared, Emily?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks from the revenue numbers like that's gotta be
How much?
included in that 1.9.
So 295, 28.
6 and change. 1.6 and change.
Yeah.
And a million.
You did $1,040,700 to be allocated from LSD.
This was last year.
We're reading it right here.
And then you had the, PD was $133,450.
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
which is. Can I see those numbers
Sure.
then?
So it was actually more, I'm not sure where all that money is going into.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
23.
Yeah.
133.
for PD.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is there,
Yep, there it is.
okay.
Just over $1 million.
Yes, please.
So, just see here.
Well, maybe the thing to do is to ask that
I
in the
need to
time
get
between
rid of
now
this,
and
obviously, on
our
the-
next
yeah.
meeting, the budget hearing, that try to fill in the blanks in the draft warning. What would be proposed.
So this is what we're looking at for fiscal year 25 is where. Okay, well, obviously I need to meet with Nicholas tomorrow about some of these. I apologize, he couldn't be here tonight, he had another commitment, so.
Better get smarter.
I'm okay, I guess. The only other thing I'd fill in the warning is that, while we're looking at this last year, is that
Mhm.
Article 4 was this little detail of shall the voters of the town of Middlebury vote to collect taxes on real property, and whether we do 2 installments, or we have been doing in recent years, or
Yeah.
revisit the idea of 3.
We're not gonna do that.
There was a reason what, that.
I know,
we
I just say that that
articulated.
article, we need to collect taxes.
Yeah,
And set the dates.
Yeah.
It's one of the pieces to add to the draft warning. I'm not trying to, I understand the reason.
Yeah.
I can answer for you in the meantime.
So what do we need to do tonight as far as moving this forward?
We've already we made the motion last time for the public hearing, so that will take place, in January. I don't
The first
date.
meeting in January,
Yeah.
yep.
If we can certainly communicate as we're moving forward, you know, and talking to staff to make any additional changes, and try to have prepared for them. And if there's questions in between, you know, if we need to have, conversations, we can certainly do so, to finish it up. I don't think there's a motion at this point that's needed. And neither for the next items, which are the revenue or, funding request increases right now. Those are just FYIs from those three agencies.
And those are already included in this budget?
Yes.
Yep, as we talked about at the last meeting, those are the three agencies you see in front of you are the ones that are requesting increases.
Yeah.
So we should maybe not hold them up any further and get those conversations going maybe?
That makes sense.
I think if the big question is just to make sure we know, the counting, still, it's a little bit wonky for me to follow the counting of the, local option tax. If you go back to look at what the voters voted on and the amount of money that we voted on, I'm not finding it tracking in those graphs.
In the general fund?
Or where it was entered
Okay,
as revenues.
okay.
And so I just wanna make sure
That's
that,
interesting, and those are
that we
ones
can
that
answer what we used and we can, as we look at it, we know exactly what we're already pulling, right?
Yep.
And if there's any latitude to pull anything more. That's really the question, is there any latitude to pull anything more?
Yep.
So I have a question. Where we're at right now, are we comfortable with a 7.44% rate increase? Are we comfortable there?
Not yet.
I mean, we haven't had any discussions about, all we've done is this is presented. We've accepted it. We've typically had
Well, we haven't
serious.
accepted it yet.
Yeah, right, but I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, but we've been very conscious in the last several years of how big a tax increase we had. We got nailed, everybody got nailed last year with the educational one. This is the largest town tax rate in,
And
I don't know how
Kathleen,
many years. You guys have been along, some of you have been along?
Yeah, we've known that this was coming, that we were gonna have some bumps. We've done a pretty good job of keeping it down.
Right.
I have a hard time saying that the community should pay, by skimping on infrastructure and stuff that every one of us needs, just because we're overspending on education. We've criticized education, it's an oversized portion of our tax bill.
Right.
And the fact that they did double-digit increases, as much as it really stinks, I think that's a state legislative issue. And we have some contractual things, healthcare, everybody knows healthcare was double-digit increases. And so there's some contractual things that if we were to try to keep it where we've kept it for years, we've really been able to keep it low for years. This is the first time we got hammered with that big of a healthcare increase. This is pretty tough.
everybody did.
I'm sorry?
Everybody did.
Yeah.
Well, but I agree with Dan that, the process of budgeting involves looking at the expenditures requested. We've just received those. We haven't really questioned them
Well, we had time.
too hard just yet. We understand
need
the
to
other
do it.
side of it is the funds we have. And I think then having the public hearing and then our job in January, isn't it, to put those equations together?
I think when we hold the public hearing, that's the final budget. There's
Yeah.
no, that's it.
If
Is
you
there
have,
any discussion after the?
if you have questions, you should be asking them now.
Yeah,
Oh,
as we continue to work on the accounting, if there are specific expenditure lines unrelated to the broader conversation about funds moving from cross street to general,
Yeah.
you know, in addition to the presentations from the department heads at the last meeting, we can certainly gather, if you have specific questions, the answers to those questions.
Yep. And we might know the answers to some of them, certainly, if you wanna.
But there's not a
But
piece of it
share
that's
those
hiding.
with us.
We
Yeah.
haven't been, so the next meeting is the public hearing, first meeting in January?
Correct.
We haven't, I haven't felt this uncomfortable in the past 4 years that I've been on this board than I do right now with the numbers that we're getting when we're still asking questions and getting, I don't know what Nick thinks this and I don't, and
No
there's just,
surprise,
it's just
yeah,
not a complete, we don't have a complete budget.
We may need to have a special
Yeah, I think so.
working group. I mean, it's a, we're used to having Kathleen, who's was
Right.
intimately
Yep.
involved in the finances, and we really need Nick here, so.
Yeah,
I
he'll be
think
here
we-
at the, I mean, he was planning to be here anyway, but because we changed the date, he was not able to be here. So,
Well,
Yeah.
the-
he will be for the January meeting, and he should be able to be for any special meeting, so.
I would feel more comfortable having some type of working group special meeting with him, because I'm just not comfortable where we're at. Maybe it's me, maybe it's just me not being
No,
comfortable.
we are
And
well,
you
we've
guys are
been
doing a great
very
job, but
transparent
we're
that we're
still
new at
asking
this,
questions.
so,
For sure.
yeah, we
Yeah.
expect that.
Yeah.
So, when is our
It would be the second,
second Tuesday?
be the
'Cause if we're gonna do a working group meeting, we should try to do it before.
Yep.
the 7th, I mean, the
Yeah.
14th is the first, or first normally scheduled meeting. So,
What date was that again,
the
Dave?
14th is the first regularly scheduled meeting, so the 7th would be the week prior, on a Tuesday,
And the 28th, we have to set the warning, right?
same time, same place.
Was it 45 days before?
Yeah.
So, I'd like to ask a question, well, Emily's here, if I might, about,
I'm here until the end of the agenda.
well, so, on the revenue side of the budget, particularly lines 39 and 40, the administrative charges to water and wastewater. So, the theory of this is that the town, general government, sends water bills and sewer bills out. We manage the water and sewer funds, and so we ought to charge the water and sewer funds some money. We're proposing an increase together of about $60,000. And, we're already sending the bills out. We're already providing the funding for Emily to manage things, and the increase of 37,800 on line 39 and 23,000. I'm trying to, I'm torn, because I'm, as a select board member on one side, we want to reduce the amount we have to raise by taxes, but as a water and sewer commissioner on the other side, we have a lot of demands on water and sewer funds and, things to fund with that, and so could you help us understand how we should justify an additional 60,000 for more water and sewer building, more management, when we already do that?
So I would say that's not really my sector. I jumped in because that was always Bill's role. And so that is based, if you look at the, let's see, what line are we on?
We're on 39 and 40.
So we looked historically and just ran the math out from each year, and I forget it off the top of my head, but I feel like water was around a 19%
Yeah.
increase each fiscal year, and wastewater was more in the 11 or 12%. So we just held that same rate increase.
So it's a percentage thing, it isn't really based on actual cost, it's just,
I have a feeling historically Dan said it based on actual cost or what Deb and Patty all day today, all they were doing was water bills. So there is a huge amount of cost involved in getting this out.
Fred, we don't wanna be reducing revenues.
I know,
No,
are you
but-
a water commissioner or a selectman tonight?
It's either hand, but we do not wanna
And I
reduce
think
it.
one way to look at it is that our, thinking about the wastewater system or the water upgrades, those rates get reflected only by the users, only by the service owners. They're the ones that have to pay for those upgrades. And really, I go out to restaurants in Middlebury all the time. I'm not a sewer rate payer. So I think putting it in this fund does even it out a little bit more because it's the bigger collective group paying for it as opposed to just the ratepayer.
Yeah, but Emily, this is an enterprise fund, right? We're supposed to run this as a business where we're providing a commodity for the people of town that are using it at the rate that it costs to provide that. And we shouldn't be milking the water and wastewater users.
I don't think you're.
That's, no.
Well, if
No.
we're
The alternative is that we hire staff specifically with water and wastewater funds. And I think
Sure.
what you'll find is we get a better deal, using town staff, who have benefits and wages through the town budget. If you really wanna be a true enterprise fund, then you have to separate it completely and you have to hire staff.
No, or you do
specifically.
have people keep track of their time
And
and,
I think,
and
and
bill
I
it
think they
to
have,
the.
and I think they have done that in the past.
I believe that happened, but I echo Fred's concern that you shouldn't just stick a 17% inflation on these transfers.
Well,
I'm not gonna argue about it.
Heather has persuaded me that the water and sewer needs are huge, and, not just Heather. But,
Reality.
so I'm thinking about water and sewer funds.
So I don't know the exact history, but this is fairly new, I wanna think, like there, for a long time, town staff did the jobs of the water, wastewater, and the billing and all that, and there was no money coming
it's
from
like-
the water,
we
no
started this
coming
in the
from the
80s
water
and
and
90s,
wastewater in to help
way
cover
back.
those costs, right? And I think it was a way to try to balance that out a little bit, and I think if initially when it was determined how much time they were spending on this, when there wasn't any money, if we had put it in where it should have been, you probably would not have been very happy, right? So I think that the
Well-
effort has been to slowly increase it over time, like we have done it with other things.
think
Obviously
they figured
Kathleen
it
is
in
not
the 80s
here,
or
but that's
90s.
my recall of the situation.
They figured in the 80s and 90s based on the percentage of the staff time in the finance department and public works management planning projects that were spent on water and sewer. They tried to come up with some percentages, and then that's where they started. Which is a good rationale for me. I just, it's just a significant increase, and I'm,
Well, given that we're spending a tremendous amount of time planning for an upgrade,
yeah,
um,
that's true.
and you take
Fair.
staff, you can take staff time, I think that it's probably a reasonable.
I mean, is your time captured in this as well? So,
Yeah, this is the staff. time.
Okay, thank you. That's,
Oh.
So can we go, we need to go back to what we were talking about before Fred did that. If we
Which
have a
is-
special
should
board
we
meeting.
have a special board meeting?
Would everybody be able to make the 7th?
Yes. Well, I can.
that's the budget hearing, right?
So can Andy.
I'll let Dan speak for everyone.
The
I can do
14th
that.
is the Warren meeting, Fred, so the 7th would be a special working
Oh, man.
with this single.
I can't do it. I'm leaving town on the 9th.
Yeah, that's the regular meeting.
That's,
This is the
that's
hearing.
where the hearing
Oh, the hearing was the 7th.
No.
Okay, I'm sorry, I got it wrong.
I think if we met at, for an hour, we could probably knock out Because it would be just a single topic meeting. If we did a
So-
special, would you want to meet earlier, like at 6 or something?
Can we schedule tentatively until we can confirm that
Or? Sure.
the staff we need to be there can be there?
And I can do any time, so.
Okay, so right now, put a placeholder for the 7th for tentative special budgeting meeting.
At 6 o'clock.
That's up to the board here. I'll come whenever. What's your preferences, everyone?
So I won't be here for the regular meeting on the 13th or 14th because I'm traveling to India for 2 weeks. I'll be back on the 26th, so I can make it the 7th, whatever time you want, I'll be here.
The best
You
one
can't
for you to
zoom
be.
in from
That's,
here?
I'm like 4 in the morning or something. That's Dan, not.
I think you could take a meeting off this week.
Would you prefer to meet at 6 or 7 typically, if we're gonna do a
How
1
don't we
hour?
do- How will we divide it and say 6:30?
6:30 it is. There we go. Okay.
And then just, Crystal and David confirm
Yeah.
with us?
Yeah,
Yep.
we're gonna,
Let you know in the morning.
Okay. All right, we're moving on
we
then.
better be ready on that one.
Be ready.
Be ready.
Re-study it. If you have
Best we can.
questions,
Well, if you have questions, you should get it to them
that would be
prior
great.
to
Right.
that
Yes,
meeting.
please give us all your questions. Come
Okay.
see us.
So they can be prepared
us,
to
whatever you wanna do.
answer those
Exactly.
questions
Thank
at the
you.
meeting.
That would be
So
very
like
helpful.
nothing new should be coming to them at that meeting.
Thank you.
Oh, that's not fair.
Okay, you've seen this now.
No, I'm not saying.
Just because you travel,
Oh,
I'm gonna warn you right now. I prepare as much for when I travel as I do when I'm here, if
I
I have the
believe it.
possibility. So don't ever say anything about me traveling, and, because I've not missed a meeting, I've only missed 4 meetings in
She's stating the
5
fact,
years.
you travel, that's all she said.
No, but she's just accusing
She
me
just
of not
said-
being prepared.
you were the one that said you didn't feel prepared, not me. You were the one that stated it out loud.
I
Wait.
stated it because of the
No, no.
answers they gave,
we're getting
because of the
information
answers.
that's not
Okay.
as
Because the
well
answers they
supported
gave
as
Yes,
I'd
tonight.
like.
and at the last meeting, they very specifically said to us, this is the first time that they have ever
right.
done this.
For sure.
They did not have support from the prior town manager in this process, and they're doing the best they can.
And I've
I
commented-
appreciate that.
And I've commented that I think they're doing a great job, but we're still at the point where we're asking questions.
And Kathleen has warned us multiple years in a row that we were gonna get to the point where we were not gonna be able to hold it to a 2% increase.
Well, we did 5 last year,
So,
Actually, it was like
5 and a
3.
half.
no, it was less than that.
It was just under 3.
Yeah.
Was it really?
It
Yes.
was.
Okay.
So, okay, we're moving on. Habitat for Humanity.
alrighty.
Where are we at here? 8:30.
Do you guys still wanna, do you still wanna come up? Do you
It's
still
usually
wanna come up
surrounding
and
me,
ask us
too,
for
so-
more money?
Do we need to sit here or can we just?
Sure, it'd be great if you stand. You can stand if you'd like.
Well, we only have our 5 minutes, so we're gonna make it fast.
That's great.
I am Blair Kloman, and I'm the current president of the Habitat for Humanity Board of Directors of Addison County. And we are here tonight to ask for an increase in our funding from 3,000 to 5,000. I keep looking at my secretary here because he's the brains of the organization.
Yeah.
We are 100% volunteer, and every penny that we get goes towards supporting our families in the community. And we, like many others, are facing some challenges financially in building site infrastructure and construction. And with 3 houses, 1 house currently under construction and 3 more to be under construction in the Gorham Lane neighborhood here in Middlebury, we are hoping to get a little bit more support from y'all. And I'm going to turn it over to Steve to talk in more particulars because he has the details.
As unaccustomed as I am to public speaking, we currently have 5 houses in Middlebury that are on the grand list or the tax rolls. 5 houses, the 6th house is gonna come online this spring of 2025. That's the first one we're building in Gorham Lane. And there'll be 3 more houses in Gorham Lane built consecutively. We build 1 house a year. That's the best we can do with our, I'm one of the younger guys on the crew. I'm only 73. So we don't go fast. But we do
But we do great work.
That's right, that's right. So you can get it fast, good, or cheap. And so you get 2 out of 3. So one of the things I'd also like to point out is the land that we're building on in Gorham Lane belonged to the college. It was donated to us. It was therefore not being taxed. Now it's going to be on the tax rolls where we own the land, and as the homeowners come on, they'll be picking up their share of the property taxes. We also make a big habit of working with local tradespeople as much as we can, which I think, keep the money local. Everybody, there's only so much money. We'll just keep passing it around to each other and make it work that way.
We have an ad coming out in the Addy Indy on Thursday that lists, I think we've got 63 local organizations that we rely on for the generosity of their time and expertise.
Correct. And we buy from local vendors. We buy a tremendous amount of material from RK, and also from Goodrose. McIntyre is doing our plumbing. We could go on, but this is what we try to do as much as possible. Right. And we also take to heart both the state and Middlebury's commitment to density, building in the town environment. And we feel that also that benefits the town as well, and that these people that are living within walking distance of most services are going to the restaurants, and they're going to the movies, and they're buying their groceries. Their kids are going to the schools. So we feel that our being in Middlebury has contributed a lot, and will continue to contribute a lot to the town's tax base. And so therefore we feel justified in asking for a wee bit of a raise.
Are there any questions? I, for one, think your program is awesome. It's our #1 priority, providing housing. And you're bringing value to that. And there is a return on investment, as you pointed out,
Right.
so in many ways. So that's great.
Can we give you $10,000 a year for 2 homes?
That means you're gonna have to work on it.
I like the way you think.
I'm going to leave this here if anybody wants to read more about it.
Go ahead.
So
Thank
you
you.
have built total 5 homes so far?
Yeah, there are 5 homes here in Middlebury.
Existing.
In what period of time?
Oh gosh, we've been in business for like 22 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
remember the first one, I think, was on North Pleasant Street on the right.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
And then we have one in South Ridge,
Yeah.
and one in
They're on the website.
right.
AddisonHabitat.org.
Oh, and another thing we did, I forgot, I wanted to mention this. We had a condominium at Otterside gifted to us about 4 years ago. And we invested quite a bit of money in it, and we sold it at market rate. It wasn't a part of our affordable housing situation, but that's another thing that, another piece of the tax puzzle that we feel we've contributed to as well.
Neat.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We think so.
Thanks for
Thank
coming
you.
and
Thanks for your time.
suffering through our budget discussion.
Yeah, it was fascinating. I'm serious. You guys-
That's what we say about it too, it's fascinating.
Oh, yeah.
Land trust.
Nothing, it's still nothing.
And by the way, I gotta show up over there at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, so,
Excellent.
if we could move.
Okay, if we could move along. Yeah, uh-huh.
Thank you.
Thank you, thanks.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
All right, this has been thrilling. It's 2 hours past my bedtime.
We've learned a lot about wastewater.
Really respect how late y'all stay up.
We're here every 2 weeks, so just come
Goodness
on in.
gracious.
Good times.
So I know most of you, but a couple of you are new faces to me. So I'm Jamie Horton, and I'm the executive director at the Middlebury Area Land Trust, which we call MALT. And with me I have
Holly Fulton,
and
and I'm on the board for MALT, and I'm also a MALT volunteer.
So we are also here to ask for an increase in our funding. For some of you who might be newer to MALT, we have been a nonprofit since 1987, and we were actually formed in partnership with the town of Middlebury all those years ago. And for a long time, we were meant to be the conservation expertise arm, so to be able to help the town start thinking about proactive conservation of natural spaces. In the early 2000s, Will Jackson donated Wright Park to the town of Middlebury. And shortly after that, MALT started receiving a small stipend each year. At the time, it was $5,400. I always wonder who came up with that exact amount. And we used that money to care for Wright Park primarily for a lot of years. In 2021, I came back to you all and asked for a modest increase to $7,000 a year. And the justification at the time was that we really just had a lot more expenses in Wright Park specifically than that $5,400 was covering. And so you were gracious, and the town graciously awarded that to us. And now I find myself looking at MALT in an entirely new chapter. As an organization, since I started 8 years ago, we've grown from 1 full-time staff to 5. And our organizational revenue has gone from $75,000 a year to about $400,000, which is small when you compare it to the numbers that you're looking at tonight, I know, but if you kind of take a minute to just pause and think about what makes this town so beautiful, it has so much to do with the natural spaces that MALT has protected and the trail networks that we maintain. All of our lands and trails are free and open to the public every day, all the time. We offer a ton of programming for the smallest of children to as old as you can imagine. We had a participant at Tamtrek this year who was 90 years old and did the 2-mile fun run. So we really serve as many people as we possibly can. And I think in growing, we've really realized our ability to leverage resources for the town of Middlebury. So a couple things I just wanted to update you on that are connected to this ask for increased funds. The state of Vermont recently passed a piece of legislation. It's coined, or like the catchphrase is 30 by 30 and 50 by 50. I'm not sure if anybody's familiar with it, but it's basically putting on paper the state of Vermont's commitment to protecting what everybody who lives here loves so much, which is the green spaces that we have. And MALT is in the process of writing a new 15-year vision for our organization, and Holly's going to talk a little bit about that. But the short of the long is that MALT really sees ourselves as hopefully the leader in Addison County in helping our section of the state achieve this goal of protecting 50% of the state by 2050, which is a very ambitious goal. But I think it's put a lot of small land trusts like MALT in a position of thinking about how can we achieve that. And I think the answer is through partnerships. It's through partnerships with towns and other conservation organizations. And I think MALT is really well poised right now with the staff that we have to do that. Some of the examples of things that I think we have been able to leverage with, for example, the funds that we receive from Middlebury or some of our other surrounding towns or our donors, is that we've really started investing time in securing grants to help improve lands and spaces. A few months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, I came here to share that MALT was able to get almost $70,000 towards work in Wright Park, improving trails and infrastructure. Those are just dollars that we never could have achieved or earned 8 years ago. The increase in staffing has really allowed us to focus on that. Another example is the Otterview Park that we've partnered with the town of Weybridge on, has that beautiful boardwalk that goes down to the creek. It's 15 years old and the Trex boards are going, and so as an organization we're able to apply for funding that's going to be about a $60,000 overhaul project on that boardwalk. Those are things that MALT just never could have achieved before in our previous chapter. And so I think when you break down an ask of $10,000 a year from the town of Middlebury, it's not really an ask. What it is the opportunity to leverage those funds to help funnel so much more money and resources towards this town. And I think that living in Vermont is an incredibly special place to be, and Middlebury is an incredibly special community. And for so many people, our trails and lands make that a huge piece of what makes us call it home. So I think that pretty much covers it. You know, there's a wide variety of other things that we do every year with our funds that benefit the residents. I could go on, but this ask is it's about 2% of our annual income needs. So it's a relatively small percent, I think, when you consider all the resources that this organization is able to provide for the community. So I'm proud to ask for it, and I'm a Middlebury resident myself, and I know that you've faced such difficult decisions with all these finances. I don't envy you, but I can truthfully sit here and tell you how, just like the other folks before me said, you know, we put every dollar straight to work. So, yeah, and I think Holly just wants to add a little bit, especially about the visioning piece that we're doing.
Yeah, I'm also a Middlebury resident, and I guess I've spent the majority of my life in the Middlebury area. So this fall, we embarked on a visioning process to try to get it, where do we want to be in 15 years? And we asked input from a wide range of community members. We heard back from almost 600 different members from different places, from, you know, sitting down and talking to people to asking people at summer camps and so forth. We wanted to find out to best understand what they love about malt and how they feel malt should direct our efforts over the next 15 years. We found that the community loved the trails and lands that we care for, but would like us to take even better care of them and create more connections between neighborhoods in Middlebury and also maybe even between towns in the area. An important piece is that the recent changing weather patterns have caused more frequent and severe flooding, and that really, combined with an increased number of people on our trails, it makes it really clear that we need more resilient, hardened trails to, you know, for folks out there. It's really exciting, the money that we will be able to put towards Wright Park. Part of it will be a section of multi-use accessible trail, and we're trying to harden up the trail so that if another flood comes, it won't things all get washed out and have to start over again, but try to get something that's durable and lasts for more time period. So Malt staff and board, we're really committed to conserving land for wildlife and nature and providing access so that people can get out there on those conserved lands. You know, whether it be summer camp or even our new middle school program, which is really exciting. Jogging on the Tam, or folks walking out and checking out the boardwalk at Otterview Park. It's in Weybridge, but it's close.
It's actually 50%
Is it 50%
Middlebury and 50% Weybridge.
It's right on the
down the
edge.
middle. The boardwalk
Okay.
is technically in Middlebury.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
The other part's Weybridge?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a wonderful place.
Yeah.
I go there a lot. I just feel like access to natural places close by is what makes Middlebury so very special. And support from the town of Middlebury and the surrounding towns provides malt really with an essential resource that allows us to pursue this invaluable work.
Yeah, no, I agree with everything Holly said, and of course I'm happy to answer any questions that you have at this point. I know malt quite well. It's been a number of years there. So thank you for listening, and
Yes.
yeah, any questions or comments? It's always good to be here.
Guess there's no questions. Thanks.
No questions?
Thank you.
We
Thank
do
you.
enjoy
Walk out
the
on the
trails.
Yes, how many of you
How
have,
many of you-
how many of you use the TAM?
Every day.
Yes, Andy.
Awesome.
I see Andy go by my kitchen window every day on the TAM.
I use it
Wow,
Oh, that's great.
several times a
we
week.
can't say that.
Yeah, I mean, I did some simple math. There's almost 10,000 people living in this town. It's $1 a person per year. I mean, it's just, think about that, what you get for $1.
I'm getting my money's worth.
Likewise.
Excellent.
Dan, let me know if you wanna go for a walk sometime. I will meet
Okay.
you.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We'll meet you on the TAM.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
There's Kurt.
Hi, Kurt. I'm Kurt Broderson, Executive Director of Middlebury Community Television. We are asking for an increase in our funding from $5,000 to $6,000. Our annual budget is around $140,000. About 80% of that is funding through cable, which is not really Comcast paying that. That's a small fee subscribers pay each month, and that's the bulk of our funding. As people cut their cord and get TV, entertainment, and news in other ways, we are, for the first time, seeing significant declines. In the past, we've budgeted on sort of a flat budget basis on the year before and known that there will be slight increases. That has changed. We had about $14,000 less revenue in '24 than in '23, and that was on top of a $1,000-ish decline from '22 to '23. So what was perceived as kind of a hopefully gentle decline is in reality more of a cliff. At the same time that people are cutting cable, we are serving more people online. Most of your audience tonight is probably on YouTube. Still people will be watching on cable, but the bulk of the audience is there. We've made, even just in the last month, significant upgrades in this room alone. That camera's $2,000 camera, $600 worth of microphones in front of you, another $1,000 worth of equipment on that table. We are streaming our 2 channels to YouTube so people can view it that way as well now. So we're serving a large number of people who are not cable consumers and haven't been paying for that. And we just need a little more revenue, and that's why we're here with this request. If there are any questions you have for me?
If you have that level of decline, how are you only asking for such a minimal?
I'd be asking
increase
for more if I thought it was responsible, and I realized there are other demands, and wastewater is significant, housing is significant. I get where we fall in the scheme of things. We are looking at other sources of revenue, state. We're going to be, this won't apply until probably FY '27, but looking at the school district to pay sort of a comparable figure for the services we provide them. So there are other sort of irons in the fire there.
Any other questions of Kurt? Your new guy Drew's taking care of us. Thank
He's
you.
Yeah.
doing great work.
Thank you.
Great, well, it's good to hear, and I pat him on the back, and it's great to have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So there's no, like I said, there's no action on this at this time, and you've got the full list in the packet as well for all of the requests. So item number 9, this is a draft. Obviously, we're not following last year's calendar. We're not acting on this, but you can see that draft. I'm going to pull it up here as well. It has 3 of the upcoming bond projects that Emily has spoken about. Obviously, we noted that there's conversations about the wastewater treatment plant, so this is not indicative of a sign-off yet, but we included the language in there just as a way to have it in there. At this point last year, obviously there were placeholders for some of the final numbers. The budget's obviously, as we've talked about, not final. But I think this was Kathleen's effort to put this in front of you well ahead of time and get a reaction to what will eventually be the warning document. So,
Comments or questions, anyone?
I said between 3 and 4, you had to insert the thing about how to
the
collect
bill
taxes.
paying. Yep. I made a note of that.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Mechanical thing we need to do.
Okay. And we'll finish filling that out. I think
It's
14th.
after the 14th
Yep.
that we have to do that, so. Okay,
So we have.
and list.
Yep, we have another document here. This is from the Lister's office. This is an annual document you see every year. This is prepared by Allison and Beth. The description there is pretty self-explanatory. It's just omissions and errors that exist within the town's current grant list. This is, I believe, something that has to be submitted annually to the state, and so they've submitted it with their signatures, and hopefully we'll pass it along for your signature unless you have any questions.
Any questions?
You need a motion on that?
I need a motion.
I had one question. I'm trying to decipher my notes from last night. The Addison County Community Trust, they sold the land and it went from 38,000 to 500 to zero. Is because they sold it. So that's not.
If you look at the next one, and it's just transferred to another person.
That's what I'm saying. Why is this one? Why is this one on here?
They're coming off, and these people are coming on.
Well, does that happen every time we sell a house?
No.
So why is this one on there?
Good question.
The date that it happened, I think.
Yeah, I don't know the answer off the top of my head, but I'll get that tomorrow.
Okay.
I'm sure Allison has an answer for that.
Okay,
Well, it's
I
interesting
think
that
there's a
they're
magic
different
date
span
has to
numbers.
Has to change that they're supposed
Different
to
span
bill.
numbers.
So it sounds like probably Addison Community Trust owned the land, and the person owned the house on the parcel.
Yeah, I think so.
And probably Addison Community Trust did not pay tax
Right.
on the land that the house sat on, that the person only paid on the house. And when they sold it, when they sold the land to the person, now the person probably pays tax on the value of the land.
So, Dan, if
That
you,
is my layperson interpretation.
right, and if you look, these are two different spans for tax purposes, and that's probably why it comes to us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because normally with a transfer,
Okay.
there's no
Yes.
value moving between spans.
It wasn't important, but I just didn't understand it.
So the
It's
reason
interesting.
why I think a lot of like where
Where
the mobile home, well, I'm assuming this is like Lindale.
Yeah.
Part of the reason why it's affordable is because the community trust owns the land
Right.
and doesn't pay tax on it, and the people that own or have
If I missed it.
houses on the land just pay property tax on the actual house and not on the land.
Okay, I did not know
Isn't that,
Yeah, that's correct.
So that's,
You got the original one?
this is
Yeah.
what we're supposed to sign.
and it sounds like they actually sold some of the land so that it is increasing
Okay.
our revenues, right?
Do we have a motion?
I believe somebody started making
I'll
that
move to
motion.
approve the 2024 grand list errors and omissions certificate as presented.
Second,
Everybody's
sorry, I'll
asleep,
second.
everybody's asleep here, okay. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Alrighty.
Got thumbs up.
Two left. We have an annual appointment that the staff from Economic Development Corporation reached us to us about. Our current appointee is here, and if you want to come on up.
I realize this is intensely competitive.
Oh, yes. Duke it out for the role.
We are about to lose our executive director, as you know. He will be transitioning out, and we are recruiting for a new director. We had one, but the Chamber of Commerce poached her. She was, I think, a shining star in the organization while she was here. That was better known word partnership. So, if you guys have any questions, I think Fred Kenny, the director, executive director, will be making a presentation on our activities. We've made, I think, 3 loans in the past year, including most recently for County Tire to build a new facility up on Route 7 for more advanced electronics problems that cars are having these days. So it's an interesting project. So any questions?
Thank you for being willing to serve.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's a good group, and it's It's an interesting process, so. All right, I gotta go to Habitat in the morning, so.
Okay.
Build a house.
We have a motion, right?
We haven't yet.
Oh,
So I move to reappoint Richard McCurr as the town of Middlebury's representative to the ACEDC.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any
All right.
opposed?
Very good night.
Very good.
Okay, thanks, Richard.
Yeah, or regrets, whatever. Condolences.
I don't think there's additional spot to sign, so
Oh,
that
dear.
probably should just go back to.
Okay. We got 5.
That's quorum.
Unless you wanna just have.
Okay, Maple Broadband.
Yes.
Um,
Good evening.
Good evening.
Ross Conrad, I'm your delegate representing the town of Middlebury on the governing board of Maple Broadband, along with Hugh McLaughlin, who's the alternate. And we're here to ask the town of Middlebury to commit as much as you feel that you can afford to from your ARPA funding for the government, federal government funds, to help Maple Broadband in its mission to bring fast, reliable fiber optic cable broadband access to pretty much everybody, but primarily the unserved and underserved and non-served individuals throughout the town and throughout the county. Basically, believe it or not, we only formed ourselves 4 years ago in 2020. We started after receiving some grant funding successfully through some of it competitive. We had, in the last 2 years, we have now built out just over 240 miles of fiber optic cable throughout the county. We have just about roughly 500 customers signed up in the past 2 years. So we're doing good, actually. Amazingly enough, our actual construction obligations have been met on schedule and under budget, which I'm sure you can appreciate with all the work that you guys see that's not always on schedule or under budget. And with me is Ellie DeVilliers. She is our executive director, and I will let her share with you more of our plans specifically in Middlebury.
Thank you, Ross. Thank you for that intro. So yes, you guys all know Maple Broadband. So I'm going to start off with just a little bit of information. So when we originally formed Maple Broadband and we started our build plans, there was really practically no fiber anywhere in the county. And now fast forward from when we started our planning in 2021, there's now quite a lot of fiber in Middlebury as well as other areas. There's the 240 miles that we've built and a lot that our partner Waitsfield and Champlain Valley Telecom has built, and also here in Middlebury, Fidium Fiber has obviously built out a lot of fiber. Having said that, there are portions, particularly in the northern parts of town, there are a couple other scattered addresses that don't have access to any sort of broadband, any sort of fiber or cable. And then there are also addresses in town that don't have access to fiber, where there's broadband according to the technical definition, which is Xfinity cable, but it's not fiber, it's not symmetrical service. And so our mission as a district is what we eventually want to get to is where everyone in the county has access to fiber optic service from at least one provider. And of course, it was interesting listening to this discussion because of course we've just had our own budget discussions and fully appreciate the considerations you guys have around trying to control costs and manage debt service and so on. So actually we will be, just in the next couple of days, I'm going to be distributing our annual report and our pro forma for this year and our budget for next year. And you'll see in that we're planning to take on debt for the first time, which is, we're anticipating is about $2 million, and we're still refining the plans, and we may, we'll have to see where that actually winds up sorting out. But so in the town of Middlebury, there's, if we were to build fiber throughout the entirety of the town of Middlebury, there's about 85 route miles we'd have to build, and that cost would be around $7 to $8 million, give or take. The cost of building through an urban should say, this becomes urban. Anyway, through a town is more than the rural areas because there tends to be more buried work, and the utility poles are more full, and so there's a greater chance you have to replace them. They're also closer together, so it's a little bit of higher cost to build in towns versus out in the rural areas. But as I just said, our plan is not where there's existing fiber, and we don't need to go down a path to get to the unserved or underserved or the portions there isn't fiber. Then we obviously wouldn't do that. So the number of miles of route miles in Middlebury that currently lack fiber, or that we need to get to the areas that lack fiber, is about 45 miles, and that cost is between about 3.75 and 4.5 million. So that's our current scope, is building that out starting next year and probably over the next 2 years. So as you may be aware, at the moment there's a federal funding program called BEAD, which is the Broadband Equity Access and Deployment Act. So we're now, the pre-application period for that is open, and so we are now in a quiet period, and we are prohibited from talking about the details of our participation in that program, but you could put 2 and 2 together. But the number of eligible miles under BEAD is less than 45. So I will probably leave it at that. So that gives you a sense of what we're planning to do and a sense of how much we're going to be building in the town of Middlebury. The other thing I should mention is that the areas that have only cable, those are the areas that unless we need to go down a route to get to the unserved and underserved, those are the areas that are not eligible under any grant program. The past grant funding that we've had, that we've mostly spent, and then the new grant funding that may be available. So those are the areas where unrestricted funding, whether it's debt that we take on or whether it's donations that don't have strings attached around the eligibility of addresses, is particularly useful. And the final thing I'll say is that the timing is really important, because this grant program, whether it continues, whether we are successful, there's certain areas, again, particularly towards the northern part of town, that we're planning to build anyway. And we really want to get started on that as soon as we possibly can, while still making sure that they're eligible under the terms of this grant if we are eventually awarded that grant funding. And so to that end, the sooner that we can have money to be able to build those routes without having to wait for a grant, then the sooner we can actually get that done and get those people served.
Any questions?
I have a question. So roughly, on the top of my head, the build out per mile is near $100,000 a mile to put in fiber?
So what we spent to date is closer to $50,000 a mile, and so those estimates are based on, for building out an area like this in a town, there's more buried areas. And again, if you look at where Fidium has built, they have omitted areas that are buried, and so who knows what, if they plan. I mean, it's possible that they might go into those areas and build, and then we wouldn't have to, but we're not banking on that happening. So the buried cost per mile is over $100,000 a mile, and the aerial cost is less. And then, as I said, also in town, you have what's called make-ready, is the process of applying to the pole-owning utility, which in this case is Green Mountain Power, to say, okay, we want to put our fiber optic cable on these poles, and if the poles are too full already, then the party which is applying to be added to the pole needs to pay for the entire cost of a pole replacement. And those are usually in the range of about $8,000 to $15,000, depending on the complexity. So you start to get into an area where there's quite a number of poles per mile, and they're busier poles, and there's more traffic control, and so on and so forth. So that's why I had that higher estimate if we were building out the entirety of the town.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
They could bring it out my way. I let them tack it to the barn and.
No, I was thinking. It's
So-
not expensive on my road either.
In our packets, we had this spreadsheet that's up on the screen here.
Hold on. This is, if we're done with questions on the broadband,
Right.
we're bringing Emily up. This is a different
Okay,
topic.
oh, that's different, okay, thank you. I thought it was where they were gonna allocate these monies, okay.
We are going to, but we have to look at ARPA funding in total.
Yeah, okay,
Yes.
thank you.
How's your take rate compared to what you were expecting?
It is overall a little bit higher than what our business model had.
Great.
Oh,
Yeah. Which is, I think it's a good thing, it's encouraging.
Yeah, no, that's exciting.
Yeah, and having said that, one of the discouraging things, the people who are interested in service, who are not able to get it because the last leg to get to their house is buried.
Yeah.
That's an additional cost we have a lot of people that are waiting in queues. So one of the programs that the state of Vermont is working on is a drop program to be able to help with those. There's over 125 at last count of homeowners who have expressed interest in service, but they have a long driveway and it's buried. And
Wow.
that's, yeah,
Yikes.
my understanding of the cost on that is about $15 a foot, and that's $2,000 here and $3,000 there.
You're talking
After
real
a while,
money.
you're talking about real money, right?
Yeah.
So,
oh my goodness.
Yeah, and our policy is just, again, for the sake of fairness, like we can't be taking on the cost of someone who has a buried driveway when someone else has an aerial, and so we say that the homeowner has to have that, but at the same time, that's a barrier for certain homeowners. So we have a lot of activities around the area of affordability and equity, and so the installation costs, particularly with buried service, and then also the rates as an area of ongoing. Yes,
A lot of discussion.
Ongoing innovation and discussion, and if anyone's interested in that, I'm happy to get coffee at some point, but not probably talk about it at. Gosh, it's already practically 10.
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, if anyone's interested, you can reach out to me. I'm Ellie at maplebroadband.net.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Emily, we need to review where we're at here. Have to be on the road at 3 a.m.
I had been
Oh my
working
goodness.
through this with Kathleen along the way, and I made these changes just based on what we had previously proposed to allocate. We had some extra funding built in. I was hoping to hire an intern to upgrade our GIS mapping, and that didn't happen. But we did we definitely need plotters, printers, scanner, sort of computer upgrades. So I held that. It's slightly reduced from what we had originally proposed, and then I reallocated it through the capital projects. The existing sewer lining project that came in slightly over the anticipated cost, and just tried to spread it out between water, wastewater, and highway, so that
And those are projects that we've already
are already contracted.
Already
So this,
contracted.
all of the ARPA funding has to be contracted this month.
That's
So
why we're
Yeah.
trying to.
Sewer
make sure.
lining is with the stone crop.
Sewer lining is with stone crop, yeah.
You gotta do that. Okay.
So the only thing that in here that we have to take action on is broadband.
Broadband, and I have to actually
In-
I have to get the PO for the plotter, the new
For the f-
plotter and that sort of
yeah.
stuff, but, yeah.
That's based upon a quote,
Yep, it's a quote I
We
got
need-
last week, so.
and do we need to do a motion to spend that?
It's a large PO that Tom would be able to sign. It's $7,000.
Okay. I was just tracking 23,928.74 for the computer printer software.
That is a new computer for the wastewater lab that came in at $1,400. I think that PO already went to Tom. A printer for the lab, which we're still working out the details of that, but that'll be in the 5,000 range. The plotter for DPW, plotter scanner for DPW, and then software upgrades.
Okay, so individually, they're all underneath his authority?
Yeah.
Okay.
And a printer for the new town manager.
And a new printer for the new.
Which is only, I think, 300 is the quote I got, very
There's
low.
lots of things going on in this room tonight that are just pretty weird.
So I think if there is any revenue left from that, I guess the printer for the town manager would be the one that we don't have a set number on. We could put it back into one of these other, like South Street or one of those that's already.
Okay. And you have to just submit a report before year end? Or did we figure that out?
Crystal was working on that the other day.
Just
Yep,
to upload
so
it, right?
I reached out to VLCT ARPA to find out, but the reporting is only in April, so you only actually report on it once a year. So we know that we need to have all of our, commitments made by having
Just have the
invoices, purchase
documentation
orders.
showing it.
Exactly, the
That
documentation
happened at
to
the end
now
of the year.
report in April.
Okay.
So we'll be prepared for that.
All right, so if, based upon this, we had reserved 50,000 for contribution to Maple Broadband, where we had a discussion.
There's no motion on that?
Sometime, we haven't we never did a motion.
Mm-hmm.
We discussed it,
Yeah.
and we have to make a decision tonight whether we're going to contribute that to Maple Broadband, or if you want to use it in a different project.
So my understanding of the sheet is that of our 2.49 blah blah, there is at this moment $74.8 thousand uncommitted, and all of these options down here on the second part as potential uses.
Well, the
This lower
74A.
part doesn't add to 2.6. This lower
Yeah.
part adds to about 195,000. Right?
Right, but my sense is that if you add in all these things, right, we get well above the 2.4.
If you add, the way I built it is if you
2.4 is what we
add
spent.
this column here
Yes.
and those down there, you end up at your 2.624.
Right.
Right.
Which
This
is.
was our ARPA funds here.
That was our.
How, oh, this is not our ARPA funds? There's
That's
2.49.
That's what we've spent.
2.624.
$624,570.
At the very
was
top
our
of the
Very top.
document.
Oh.
Where it says total ARPA funds.
Thank you.
So this,
So I think the column on the left has the initial allocations that were divided up
Don't understand.
by highway, water, wastewater, stormwater, and then there were some more general ones that never got determined. Does that make sense?
Gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, now it all makes sense.
Put it together?
Perfect.
Okay.
So the agenda notes, they were supposed to have a motion, well, at least for the 50,000, but shouldn't it cover the whole?
No,
No?
we'd already
We've already
given
done it.
those
We've already done the
funds.
whole,
Right.
okay.
We distributed, if you look at that sheet, way back when we got the money, we said we were getting bombarded by every nonprofit or anybody who wanted some money. Well, the town's got this windfall. Well, we really didn't, because we had a lot of projects that we needed to do.
Sure.
And so we looked at it and we said, okay, let's break it out in these percentages. And so that far left column that says ARPA allocation, that was the select board's initial allocation of funding to highway, water, wastewater, stormwater. And then we did a special allocation for broadband. We have never acted upon actually a motion to give the money to broadband, because we were waiting to see how they were gonna make, what kind of progress they were gonna make, and if it was gonna come to fruition, that it was gonna actually happen, so.
To that same note, Brian, do we need to make a motion if we're changing those initial allocations? Like, for example, wastewater is an easy one. Initially you had allocated 737,879, and that was all proposed at the Halliday Road pump station, which we utilized. The project went slightly over, but so then I'm also proposing to add Seminary Street sewer lining to that So I don't know if you need to,
We could, just if we wanna CYA.
or
The
if
money,
you
the
just,
money was given for wastewater,
right,
but it's probably not.
or just
it'd be a
approve it
good-
as shown here, so that it's at least documented that.
Yeah, if we reference that we
Yeah.
accept projects here,
Yeah.
including broadband, I think we're good.
I think just because
It's
the
shown on the
totals
spreadsheet.
have changed, I
can't
think
we
we
just
should.
Yeah.
can't approve the spreadsheet?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanna know what you, okay, I'm good for that.
So if we wanna do that in
Are we
total,
comfortable with 50,000 to Maple Broadband? That's the question you asked me.
It makes the numbers balance.
Yes.
Oh, there's a rationale.
But we also have talked about
They'll
that
take
number
it.
before.
yeah,
We have
well,
discussed that number.
I mean, it's, other communities have given to broadband.
Right.
And they are committing to building out in Middlebury. Originally, they were out in other communities.
Hampton made that up, but probably, yeah.
So,
We actually have service in some of Middlebury right now, southwestern.
I have Maple Broadband.
And they came to us for the hub proposal back in
Yep.
October,
Right.
September?
yeah.
The school board just granted that easement.
Oh, they did?
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
Nicely done.
Great.
I don't think I'll ever,
They had nothing else to do.
I don't think I'll ever see broadband at my house. I'm looking at
Starlink? No?
Starlink now.
You should get Starlink, that's very good.
But I think we should put the money towards, serving our
I think so too.
communities.
Okay.
So, if so,
Let's move it.
let's move it.
Flip at 10 o'clock.
I'll move to authorize the expenditure of $50,000 from the town of Middlebury's ARPA funding to Maple Broadband.
Friendly amendment, I move to
Se-
support that and the other
Well, let's
pieces that.
Let's do this one as a separate.
Okay.
And then
right,
let's,
right, okay.
I'm seconding, Farhad's motion.
okay. Any questions or comments? All in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Thumbs up. And then you wanna,
I would like to move to allocate all of our ARPA funding as presented in the document with the packet.
Second.
moved and seconded, questions, comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so, we have now officially spent all the ARPA money
Woo, good work.
before the end of the
Yes.
deadline.
So we're the last
Down to the
contributors.
down to the wire.
Next is check warrants.
That is my duty this week. I have reviewed the checks and I would no issues. I would move to approve the total expenditures in the amount of $420,456.76, consisting of $257,609.81 for accounts payable and $162,846.95 for payroll for the period December 11th, 2024 through December 17th, 2024.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Somebody didn't sign the second.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, no, I signed, but I noticed
I
when it
signed.
came to me that somebody missed signing the second place, so make sure you go through and
I got both those.
we're missing a signature.
Okay, board member concerns, Farhad,
All good, thank you.
Heather.
See you next year.
Yeah, no kidding. Fred,
Happy holidays.
Dan,
First of all, I publicly apologize for Heather for snipping at you. I apologize, I'm sorry I did that. But,
But thank you.
What's she mumble?
She said she didn't need it, but I thought that was a good call.
Okay.
That's the same thing.
I have to be as smooth when I have an opportunity. But I'm really excited to see Stonecrop, all the excavation that's going on over there and keeping Andy awake probably. But
It's fine, they work the right hours. It's very good. It's not the drilling
exciting.
next
We
door.
didn't have a shovel, you know,
That's February 3rd, I think.
Is it?
It's been scheduled.
it's February 3rd in the Town Hall Theater in
Yeah.
Newark.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I missed something.
You were included.
No, I just missed seeing that. I didn't
Yeah,
realize.
okay.
This is the one I reviewed. This is the one
Isabel?
this week.
But don't worry about it.
This is a prior.
Just a big thank you to all the town staff for another great year.
Yay.
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, holy cow, it's hard to believe it's the end of the year. Merry Christmas, happy holidays, all that good stuff. Thanks for the work on the budget. It's been, yeah, it's new. It's good. I'm glad we're gonna have a chance to all get super comfortable with it before we bring it to the vote.
Yeah. I won't say we're not struggling a little bit, but I think it's, we
To
just
be
want
expected.
we want to understand it, so that when we're there in front of the voters, we can explain it well.
So to that point, if you have suggestions on places where you wanna see reductions or changes, that all should go to
Please.
Crystal and David prior to the meeting on the 7th.
Yes.
Yes, oh yes, thank you.
Go ahead.
Sorry, real quick, this did not get signed at one of the previous meetings that Emily had needed signed, for one of the state revolving loans. So if we could get the signatures, please, before we leave.
Okay. So, we'll adjourn.
Just one second. You want-
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Moving second.